This kid is named Harkin, and he's the strongest guy in his guild. One day, his friends were cornered and about to be wiped out by the group led by Siro, the Thunder Queen. When everything seemed lost and the order to kill was given, Harkin showed up to protect them. He was strong enough to save everyone, so he told his friend not to worry. But what he didn't expect was that the real enemy was right by his side. His friends attacked him from behind with a fatal strike. The worst betrayal always comes from those closest to you. The girl then mocked him, revealing she paid the traitors a few million, while Harkan, who is poor and depends on the game to survive, would lose everything. The penalty for dying in the game would bankrupt him in real life. Harkin's real name is Jae-hyun. He believed he could trust people, but money proved otherwise. When he woke up in his house, he screamed in frustration over the defeat. Warlord is the most popular global game in the world and generates fortunes for the top players. Jae-hyun was recognized for his skill, but he chose to stay in a small guild out of gratitude since they were the first to accept him. Consumed by rage, he grabs his stuff and runs through the city to get revenge on the traitors in real life. On the way, his friend calls him, but Jae-hyun was blind with fury and didn't see the red light. The truck of Isekai hit him full force, leaving him with terrible injuries. Even in pain, he remembers the betrayal of those thugs and swears revenge at any cost. Suddenly, the scenery around him changes, and he finds himself back in the Warlord Games tutorial. The system instructs him to defeat a Minotaur monster. Confused by what's happening, he hears two other players screaming for him. They beg for help, explaining that many of their companions were injured by the monster, and that now only the three of them are left to face it. Looking at the colossal creature, the hero questions if it shouldn't have been removed from the game 5 years ago due to its extreme difficulty. Hearing this, the other two players get confused and reply that the game was launched only 10 months ago. At that moment, the hero realizes he was sent back 5 years in the past. When the two players urge him again to help defeat the monster, he simply grabs his sword and charges in solo. The Minotaur lunges at him, but he dodges with ease and slices the creature to pieces in an instant. The two players are shocked to see that and invite him to join their guild. At that moment, our hero thinks about his past and how his old group betrayed him just for money. Without hesitating, he kills the two of them right there and comments that he's made a decision. He will never trust anyone again in this life. After logging out, Jae-hyun woke up in the real world. Looking around, he realized he wasn't home, but in a V-Gear store, the equipment used to play Warlord. Jae-hyun remembered that 5 years ago, he couldn't afford such gear, forcing him to use a demo unit. Slowly, Jae-hyun understood. He had, in fact, traveled back in time. With this realization, he concluded there was no time to waste. Jae-hyun knew he possessed 5 years of in-game experience, along with all the skills he'd developed. With this knowledge, if he played his cards right, he could finally have his revenge. So he quickly tried to buy a V-Gear unit on credit. The store clerk was startled by Jae-hyun's desperation, but tried to process the payment nonetheless. However, as Jae-hyun's mind raced with thoughts of vengeance, the clerk informed him there weren't enough credit funds on his card. That's when reality hit Jae-hyun. He knew he had no money. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been playing on a demo unit. Even though he couldn't afford it now, Jae-hyun knew it was only a matter of time until he earned money through the game. But for that, he needed the gear. Then Jae-hyun glanced to the side and saw Syl in an advertisement, trying to recruit more players for Warlord. The Thunder Queen was seen as a role model, which was why she was used in game advertisements. Jae-hyun realized he didn't have many alternatives, and even though he hated Syl for what she'd done, he knew he couldn't be picky right now. Sometime later, back at his home, Jae-hyun received a V-Gear unit. The equipment technician installed the unit for him, leaving it ready for use. Jae-hyun realized the only way he'd gotten the equipment was through a loan. He'd borrowed 10 million won from a loan shark. The loan shark hadn't hesitated to lend the money, even though it was a hefty sum. However, he'd threatened Jae-hyun with a knife, saying that if Jae-hyun couldn't pay him back, things would get ugly. Jae-hyun hadn't wanted to resort to this, but it was his only alternative. He figured that even if he had to crawl through hell, he'd agree to anything, as long as he could have his revenge against those who betrayed him. After that, Jae-hyun logged into his very own V-Gear cabin for the first time, and immediately returned to Warlord as his character, Harkan. Back in the game, Jae-hyun thought it was time for an important character to appear. Just as he thought that, a character appeared, congratulating Jae-hyun on completing the tutorial. Her name was Ariadne, and she said she was there to guide him through class selection. Ariadne stated that the adventurer was ready, and now had to choose his basic class from 3 available options, as the chosen class would determine his abilities later. The first was the warrior class, a fighter who used close-range weapons in combat, perfect for those who loved action-packed, adrenaline-fueled battles. Jaehyun thought he'd chosen this class in his previous life, but he'd only leveled up fast because he played with a team. Now that he was alone, it would be much harder. Ariadne also presented the priest class, explaining it was a support class that healed and strengthened allies, but Jaehyun dismissed it, stating he wouldn't waste time with other players. In that case, Ariadne said only the third option remained. Then she blessed Hurkan with his new class and sent him to the class tower. There, Hurkan was greeted by an elder. The NPC introduced himself as Golko, the guide to the path of magic. Golko then asked what type of magic Hurkan intended to learn. Straight to the point, Hurkan declared he wanted to learn dark magic. Golko was confused by the request and asked if the young man didn't want to learn something else, but Hurkan insisted he did not. With that, Golko explained that while powerful dark magic devoured the user's soul, making it quite dangerous, Jaehyun stated he was aware of this, and for that very reason, he wished to learn such magic. Due to his persistence, the elder changes his approach and reveals his true colors. Golko says it's been a while since a young man asked to walk this path. After that, Golko reveals a dark tome and tells Hurkan that if he's ready, he should place his hand on the skill book, but warns him that this path is treacherous, even for the faint of heart. Without hesitation, Hurkan places his hand on the book. He declares his heart isn't weak and he wants to get this over with. The wizard begins to laugh maniacally, claiming that finally, someone interesting has appeared. For the first time, Jaehyun feels the dark magic. He remembers that in his past life, there were mentions of a necromancer player who once cleared a boss raid solo. And at this moment, this is the power Jaehyun is seeking, the power of a necromancer. Now that his class and skills are set, Jaehyun makes his first use of the bone shard skill. With it, Jaehyun can use bones from dead creatures to summon undead allies, as this is the special ability of the necromancer class. Now, Jaehyun wants to level up and plans to head to the nearest dungeon. However, looking at his ally, Jaehyun realizes it just lost its head and notes that this task won't be as easy as he imagined. A short while later, Jaehyun enters the training dungeon, but he laments, remembering the fragility of the skeleton he created. Because, according to what he knew from his past life, skeletons weren't this fragile. Jaehyun takes the opportunity to check the skeleton's stats and figures its weakness is due to low proficiency. So Jaehyun realizes he'll have to level up very quickly. Soon after, some wolves appear to confront him, and Jaehyun thinks this is exactly what he needed. These wolves aren't very strong, but they're fast, making them perfect for testing Jaehyun's combat performance. With that, Jaehyun summons his skeleton again and orders his ally to engage the monsters. As soon as the skeleton rises, it assumes a combat stance and faces the wolves head-on. With that, Jaehyun orders his ally to eliminate the enemies. Immediately, the skeleton charges towards the enemies. Jaehyun thinks that if he keeps this pace, he'll reach a high level faster than expected. However, his expectations are shattered when Jaehyun sees his ally utterly destroyed before his eyes. Jaehyun truly didn't expect such a catastrophic outcome. The skeleton's head is the only part left of his ally. Despair grips Jaehyun as he realizes something is terribly wrong. So, he decides to check his ally's stats again. Then Jaehyun realizes he forgot to set a mode, which is why the skeleton fell so quickly. So, Jaehyun chooses defense mode for his ally. Even so, the skeleton loses to the wolves again. In that case, Jaehyun decides to test the special action mode, but instead of fighting, the skeleton starts dancing with the wolves, leaving Jaehyun even more bewildered. Jaehyun starts to think this must be a nightmare, because there's no more time to delete this account and start over, no way to change classes, and the loan payment is already due soon. Just as Jaehyun thought he was finally making progress, he was slammed 2 steps back. Not only that, but he's stuck with an utterly useless ally. It makes Jaehyun wonder, how did the necromancer from his past life manage to evolve so much with such a seemingly useless class? Suddenly, Jaehyun's system flashes an alert. There's an option to boost the skeleton's combat prowess. Before, Jaehyun had to dispatch the wolves himself, as the skeleton stood by uselessly. But then, a realization hits Jaehyun. The skeleton wasn't uselessly standing by. It was observing his every move, learning to fight from what it witnessed. That's it. Jaehyun finally understands how to evolve the skeleton's combat abilities. He shoves a stick into the skeleton's bony hand, telling his ally it's lucky to be one of his minions. In his past life, Jaehyun was renowned as a genius, capable of training guild novices and forging them into top-tier rankers. Jaehyun tells his ally, when you fight, remember one thing, if you don't dodge, you'll be crushed. Then, Jaehyun slams a blow into his skeleton, repeating the assault until his ally finally learns to dodge. But the skeleton is agonizingly slow to show any progress. Jaehyun barks at his ally, "Don't just stand there after taking a hit. Dodge first, then find an opening and counterattack." After a grueling training session with its master, the skeleton is once again thrown into the fray against the wolves. This time, however, the skeleton performs flawlessly. Following its master's precise instructions, it weaves, dodges, and counters with deadly precision. The skeleton defeats the wolves all on its own. Jaehyun admits his ally still has a long way to go, but he can already see the undeniable improvement. What's more, Jaehyun's own skills have progressed, and thanks to his ally's newfound proficiency, he levels up. Sometime later, Jaehyun makes his way to the game's starting village, Figus Castle. In the village, countless recruiters clamor to enlist new members into their guilds. Jaehyun, however, ignores them all. His mind is solely focused on one goal, making his ally stronger and in turn, boosting his own personal attributes. But amidst his thoughts, someone confronts him. A warrior grabs Jaehyun, demanding an apology for bumping into him, or he won't let him go. Jaehyun thinks he has no time for these bullies. He has more important things to do. Infuriated by the dismissal, the bully tries to punch Jaehyun, but before Jaehyun can even react, someone intervenes on his behalf. The man tells the bully, "You can't just go around punching people." The bully then asks, "Are you his friend?" The man says no, but Jaehyun feels a strange familiarity. He suddenly realizes he knows this man from his past life. With muscles bulging and veins practically popping, clad in odd attire, it can only be Shev the Slayer, a legendary warrior from Jaehyun's past life. However, Jaehyun has no idea what someone like Shev is doing here. Regardless, the bully grows furious at the interference and tells Shev to stay out of his business. He adds that Jaehyun provoked him and therefore deserves punishment, an eye for an eye after all. Hearing this, Shev unleashes a sinister aura, making the bully cower like a whipped dog. Shev states that the bully hit his palm when he threw that punch, and following the aggressor's own logic, he should be punished for it. The bully's friend warns him of the danger of facing Shev the Slayer. He knows Shev is the leader of the Red Bulls, one of the top 30 guilds, and is notoriously thirsty for battle. The bully wonders, what's a guy like that doing here? However, as he turns to leave, Shev the Slayer asks if the bully still wants to continue the fight. Immediately the bully bolts, apologizing profusely for the disturbance. A smile gracing his lips, Shev says he's happy everything ended well. After that, Shev turned to the protagonist, assuring him that Jaehyun wouldn't have any more trouble with those guys. However, Jaehyun turned his back on Shev, coldly stating he didn't need his help, leaving Shev utterly speechless at his sheer coldness. After all, the killer had expected at least a thank you. As he walked away, Jaehyun mused that for a moment he had been completely overwhelmed by Shev's power, but he vowed to himself that the next time they met, things wouldn't end the same way. Sometime later, deep within a dungeon, the protagonist reflected on the obvious gap between him and Shev. What's more, Sil and Shev were at the same level, meaning Jaehyun needed to become just as strong if he ever hoped to get his proper revenge. Lost in thought, Jaehyun was suddenly ambushed by a monster, but his loyal skeleton ally swiftly intervened. The protagonist had intentionally used himself as bait, letting his skeleton handle the enemy. With the monster defeated, his ally leveled up. However, Jaehyun grumbled that it took his skeleton 3 whole days to reach level 10, far longer than he'd anticipated. Even so, the protagonist himself had also evolved, and now he possessed the Watch, an essential device packed with features, attributes, quests, a map, inventory, and messages. He'd owned an identical watch in his past life and had been eagerly awaiting its return, but he lamented that his previous attributes had been stripped away. Regardless, Jaehyun now had to distribute his attribute points, knowing this crucial choice demanded careful consideration. Jaehyun considered the most obvious path for a necromancer, boosting his intelligence or magic. He ultimately dumped all his points into strength. Instantly, his strength surged dramatically, and he could feel the profound difference, not just him, but his ally too. Noticing his skeleton's apparent discomfort, Jaehyun reassured it, "Don't worry, I haven't given up on being a necromancer. I'm just doing this to better train my minion." He reasoned that boosting intelligence or magic right now wouldn't make much of a difference. But by investing in strength, he could personally demonstrate every single blow he'd mastered at his peak in his past life. Jaehyun declares he's literally staking his life on this, warning the skeleton that he'd better take his training seriously from now on. He also mentions there are other ways to make up for his other stats. Sometime later, at the Figus Castle branch of the Monster Hunting Association, the host announces new missions have just dropped. A brawl erupts among the adventurers, all vying for the tasks, as missions are still a rare commodity at this time. Amidst the chaos, he approaches and asks if he can see the mission list. The host agrees, but warns him that all that's left are the missions nobody wants, the difficult ones, or those with terrible rewards. Jaehyun quickly realizes that on top of that, most of the missions are incredibly dull, but he's got limited options. Scanning through the various tasks, Jaehyun finds one that catches his eye, a mission called Mount Bima Cave, which basically involves clearing out low-level monsters. The host questions if he's really going to take a mission with such a pathetic reward. Jaehyun confirms. He figures that despite the meager payout, if he completes the mission before hitting level 15, he'll snag an ultra-rare title. A title like that usually boosts a user's stats, but the Ascending Star title increases stats by a percentage. In other words, this is Jaehyun's first step to becoming a character with unrivaled power. With that in mind, he decides it's time to get some new gear. Some time passes, and Jaehyun arrives at Mount Bima, ready to put his new gear to the test. However, his new equipment is ridiculously ugly, and Jaehyun knows it. He'd spent so much on gear for his ally that there wasn't much left for himself, leaving him with this hideous outfit. Regardless, he figures he just needs to clear this mission to finally afford some decent clothes. So, he dashes off to complete the task as fast as humanly possible. In the same area, another player lay helpless, begging for aid, but his pleas went unheard. This player had just fallen into a trap, and the group that ambushed him lurked nearby, waiting for their next victim. On Mount Bima, an adventurer named Multi had just arrived. Multi was buzzing with excitement, convinced he was incredibly skilled and might even become a top ranker in record time. Lost in these thoughts, Multi suddenly heard someone cry for help, claiming their friend was gravely injured. Multi approached, and the other adventurer explained that he and his friend had been ambushed out of nowhere. Their healing potions were gone, and the adventurer couldn't help his friend alone. Concerned, Multi offered some potions, and readily agreed to help. The adventurer thanked him profusely, tears streaming down his face. But in reality, the adventurer was just a distraction, a decoy for an accomplice to attack Multi from behind. Just like that, another player fell into their trap. The bandit adventurers mocked Multi's naivety, declaring his items would be very useful. Outraged, Multi couldn't understand why they had tricked him. The bandit adventurer simply sneered, "It's not our fault. You fell into our trap too easily." Then, the bandit delivered the final blow, eliminating Multi from the game. Multi's watch, containing his inventory and all his precious items, was left behind. The bandits cheered, celebrating their easy loot. They were the Ralph family, infamous as the PK gang, already plotting their next victim. In the same territory, the protagonist's skeleton ally faced an enemy. The skeleton stood before two forest wolves. Then Jaehyun activated the skeleton's attack mode. Instead of defending, the skeleton charged, swiftly defeating the wolves. Jaehyun realized that with the sword he'd bought for his ally, the skeleton could probably take down an entire pack of wolves by itself. Seeing this, Jaehyun felt he'd made the right choice investing in his ally's gear, believing true gamers focused on performance over appearance. After the fight, the skeleton waited for its master's approval, but instead Jaehyun simply stated they needed to level up fast, so it was time for the next battle. The skeleton obediently followed its master deeper into the forest. Suddenly, mid-walk, the skeleton was struck by an arrow, catching it completely off guard. Jaehyun was equally stunned by the shot. Immediately after, someone appeared, profusely apologizing. It was the same gang from before, claiming they'd seen the skeleton from afar and mistook it for a monster. The gang leader quickly apologized for the incident. However, Jaehyun instantly recognized them as looters just by looking at them. So Jaehyun went on high alert around this group. Outwardly though, Jaehyun tried to play it cool, acting natural and saying it was fine, but that he needed a mana potion for his ally. The gang leader claimed they had no potions, but offered to help Jaehyun level up, since the skeleton's mana would automatically recover upon leveling. The leader added that they felt guilty and wanted to redeem themselves. Just then, some monsters appeared, and the gang leader declared, "Perfect timing." He said his group would weaken the monsters, leaving them for Jaehyun to deliver the finishing blow. That's a blatant lie, of course. The entire gang is convinced they've found the perfect victim for their scheme. First, the bandits aggro the monster. Next, their group's mage casts an attack buff. And finally, they unleash the monster on their target. They're certain Jaehyun will panic and be wiped out, saving them the dirty work. However, the opposite happens. Jaehyun effortlessly defeats the monster, thanks to his ally. Maintaining his composure, Jaehyun tells them, "I liked your help. Keep it coming." This makes the bandit group realize their target's level is far higher than they anticipated. The bandits decide to unleash even more monsters simultaneously. While their target is distracted, the bandits plan to strike from behind. But as they try to execute their plan, Jaehyun dodges the attack as if he'd already predicted it. To the bandits' dismay, he not only missed his strike but was instantly counterattacked. With a single devastating blow, the bandit was defeated. Immediately after, Jaehyun commands his minion to assume an attack stance. The skeleton readies for battle. The two charge straight into the remaining looters. Seeing this, the bandits descend into panic, suddenly wanting to talk things out. But for Jaehyun, no argument will sway him. Jaehyun and his ally mercilessly cut down the bandits without hesitation. After all, Jaehyun knows this type of player all too well. The kind who earns a target's trust only to stab them in the back and loot their items. Jaehyun believes that while he might have fallen for such tricks in his past life, he's a different person now, the kind who trusts no one. Jaehyun delivers the final blow to the bandits, noticing they already possessed 8 watches from eliminated players. But since the bandits won't be needing those items anymore, Jaehyun decides to claim everything for himself. He needs some decent clothes, after all. Meanwhile, Jaehyun's ally is getting his revenge for the arrow he took earlier. Jaehyun observes the skeleton's bloodlust, but lets him vent to his heart's content. A short while later, Jaehyun takes the opportunity to heal his ally. This makes the skeleton even more animated. Jaehyun notices his ally's joy, but tells him, "You shouldn't get too attached to appearances. They don't matter that much in this game." He claims what truly matters is being beautiful on the inside. However, the protagonist's brand new clothes immediately expose his hypocrisy. Jaehyun also notes that the stolen watches are a perfect fit. Selling another player's watch causes your inventory to drop random items, rare and enhanced cosmetic gear, battle weapons with bonus attributes, and even skill books and gold. For Jaehyun, it's practically like winning the lottery at someone else's expense. What's more, he's leveling up faster than expected, and soon, he wants to start recording his gameplays. Amidst all this, Jaehyun is struck by a memory from his past. Talking with his friend about forming a guild. Back then, they considered naming it the Mask Guild, inspired by an item they'd found. Looking at the mask in the present, Jaehyun realizes just how much he's changed, but he refuses to let anyone take what's his ever again. Jaehyun believes this is just the beginning, and the skeleton will be his only ally on his new journey. Sometime later, the protagonist and his ally plunged into the Mount Bima cave dungeon. Jaehyun remembered this place, knowing it was a den of blue werewolves. Though dangerous, Jaehyun believed his current gear would make short work of them, so he pressed forward with his skeleton ally. Hours passed, yet Jaehyun found no monsters in the cave. He knew the dungeon wasn't cleared. The system would have notified him, so he couldn't understand why the place was utterly empty. Then, amidst the silence, he spotted something unusual. Jaehyun moved closer to investigate. Just like that, he activated a portal to an instant dungeon. He instantly realized this was why no monsters had appeared. Instant dungeons are randomly generated within other dungeons and only close once completed. They're far tougher than regular dungeons, but they drop superior loot. But there's a catch. Once you enter, the only way out is to clear it, or die. The protagonist knew the smart move was to retreat immediately. Dying meant a 2-day penalty, a devastating setback. But Jaehyun was on a different path now, a new journey from his past life. He didn't hesitate, he just needed to survive until the end. Stepping through the portal, Jaehyun found himself in an arena. An intense aura gripped him. What kind of monster would he face here? Then, his question was answered. A colossal werewolf materialized before him. Not just any werewolf, but a corrupted one, its level unknown. The protagonist had seen it all, but even he was genuinely stunned. The battle erupted with a savage blow from the werewolf. Jaehyun was sent flying from the impact. His ally braced itself, knowing it could be next. But Jaehyun just laughed. "I'm lucky," he declared. A monster like this could only mean a main quest. He told his ally, "If we don't take this thing down, you won't get dinner tonight." With that, Jaehyun charged the enemy, his ally ready to back its master. The skeleton used its sword as a launch pad, propelling Jaehyun into a massive leap, positioning him directly above the monster. He unleashed a demonic curse, infusing his blade with its dark power. Now, Jaehyun had the power he needed to strike the enemy and tear it apart. Not only did Jaehyun land a devastating blow, but he also cursed the monster, weakening it further. He'd never used this before, but Jaehyun was thrilled to have nailed it on his first attempt. The monster, however, was far from pleased. Enraged, it lunged at the protagonist, attacking him from behind. Jaehyun knew a boss wouldn't fall from a single hit, so he wasn't surprised to see the wolf rise. Now, Jaehyun decided to unleash something he'd been saving. He activated his watch, pulling something from his inventory. Moments later, the protagonist was enveloped in magical armor, fully equipped to crush his foe. The Activate Slots feature was unique to Warlord. When used, the watch channeled pure Warlord energy, boosting the player's stats and reshaping their body. The resulting form was usually unpredictable, varying wildly between players. That's why players called it Supreme Mode. With Supreme Mode active, Jaehyun was ready to fight. The enemy glared furiously and lunged again, but as it tried to claw Jaehyun, the wolf missed every strike. Jaehyun dodged them all. Still, Jaehyun noted the wolf's unnatural speed. He knew getting hit by these attacks would be fatal, so Jaehyun dodged with everything he had. Jaehyun isn't just playing defense, though. Spotting an opening, he strikes back. Not only that, but his attacks are even stronger thanks to Supreme Mode. Seeing how effective his blow is, Jaehyun declares, "This just makes the game even more fun." However, the wolf recovers faster than expected, lunging at Jaehyun immediately. Jaehyun barely dodges, noticing the wolf is still absolutely furious. But Jaehyun reminds his foe, "You must have forgotten something. I'm not fighting alone!" After all, his skeleton ally is ready and waiting. While the wolf was focused on Jaehyun, the skeleton seized the distraction to attack. Jaehyun tells his ally, "Time to put our training to the test." Confused, the enemy has no idea what's coming next. And to the wolf's shock, Jaehyun and his ally strike simultaneously. They hit the wolf from multiple directions, slicing the monster apart and leaving no room for reaction. After defeating the monster, Jaehyun praises his own high performance. Not only that, but he also reaps the rewards, satisfied with his conquest. After all, tougher dungeons yield the best prizes. Among the items, Jaehyun gets the Corrupted Tracker's necklace, a unique and incredibly powerful artifact. He notices this item can't be sold and is far beyond the normal class of such gear. Amidst all this, Jaehyun is stunned to find he's also acquired 3 new titles. One was expected, Rising Star. The second, Hero Challenger, makes sense since Jaehyun cleared an instant dungeon solo. But the third title, Corrupted Tracker, truly grabs his attention. Jaehyun knows this is the introductory title for the first chapter of the main quest, Corrupted Count. The main quest is the backbone of the Warlord world, a crucial storyline. With its incredible rewards, every player wants a piece of it. However, even in his past life, Jaehyun never made it past Chapter 4. This time, the quest unlocked for him much earlier than anticipated. This leaves Jaehyun hyped for what's to come. Sometime later, outside the game, Jaehyun sees news that the Hydra Guild has officially entered the final phase of the Corrupted Count scenario. The guild leader promises to complete the quest within 3 months. Seeing this, Jaehyun realizes it's too late. This guild is already in the final phase and he's barely even started. He figures there won't be anything left for him. Jaehyun considers it might be better to sit this one out and aim for the next chapter instead. Or maybe, this is the perfect opportunity. Because right now, the entire world is focused on the Count, and Warlord's first main quest is about to be completed. Jaehyun figures if he posts his video about the Corrupted Count, it could go viral in no time, earning him a ton of cash. He thanks himself for recording everything and now wants to post it ASAP. But Jaehyun knows editing is the magic behind any video, so he can only trust this job to one person, the legendary editor from his past life. She's known as the filmmaker Romani. Since they haven't met in this life yet, Romani receives the editing request and wonders what a level 15 player could possibly have that's special enough to warrant her work. But upon seeing the message's content, Romani is utterly shocked. She stumbled upon something truly astonishing, and immediately, Romani thinks she's found a genuine rare gem. A short while later, a sharp businesswoman summons an employee, announcing a fresh video about the Corrupted Count just dropped. What truly grabbed her attention was the video itself, a level 15 player single-handedly taking down a corrupted werewolf. Her employee quickly dismisses it, stating his team reviewed the footage and found no value. But unlike everyone else, the director is intrigued. She orders her employee to bring this player to the company. This is Seol-yeon Chae, heiress to Thunder Corporation, South Korea's largest conglomerate, and Jaehyun's arch-nemesis from his past life. After all, her warlord name is Sil, the Thunder Queen. Meanwhile, Jaehyun nearly jumps out of his skin when he checks his phone. He sees the video he posted just yesterday has already racked up an insane number of views. Jaehyun recalls how tough it was to achieve anything like this in his past life, but now, things are moving at lightning speed. Even his interactions with Romani have shifted. She's far more communicative now, a stark contrast to her reserved personality in his past life. Romani never used to reach out first, but ever since she edited his video, she's been showing a lot of interest in Jaehyun. Not only that, but she's become so annoying, Jaehyun's seriously considering blocking her. All Romani wants to know, though, is when Jaehyun will edit his next video, but Jaehyun has no clue what to do for his next video. Finding another monster like the corrupted werewolf isn't exactly an easy task, so he decides to log into the game, hoping some new ideas will spark. Elsewhere, Shev is glued to the protagonist's video. No matter how many times Shev rewatches it, Hurkan's movements impress him every single time. Plus, Shev has this nagging feeling he's seen this player somewhere before, he just can't place him. Amidst his musings, Yel, an associate from the Red Bulls Guild, asks who Shev is rambling about. Shev replies he's talking about Hurkan, the hottest player right now. His friend teases that Shev has watched the video so many times he's starting to lose it, but Shev insists he can't stop watching. Seeing this player fight is just too thrilling. He even wonders what it would be like to face Hurkan in a duel. But Yel cuts him off, telling him to stop spouting nonsense because she has a live stream to prepare for. Shev seizes the chance to gush about how much he likes Yel. Yel, however, tells Shev to hurry up. Over 200,000 people are waiting for the stream to start, and they all want to see Shev in action. After all, he's Shev the Slayer, leader of the Red Bulls and ranked 9th in Warlord. A dungeon portal is about to rip open. Shev and his companions stand ready. Then, Shev commands his guild members to brace themselves for the coming battle. Back to Jaehyun, he headed to the Mission Association, but found nothing to his liking. He'd expected as much, yet still held out hope for a worthwhile quest. With no other options, he had to put his video plans on hold. Amidst his disappointment, the host recognized him as the adventurer from Bima Mountain Cave. The man, named Hotan, asked if Jaehyun had a moment to talk. A while later, Hotan revealed he knew Hurkan had encountered a mutant in the cave. The protagonist clarified that he'd only found a werewolf with strange eyes, but Hotan insisted that was exactly what he meant, explaining there was a high chance the defeated monster had been exposed to the Corrupted's power. Hotan didn't know the Corrupted's exact identity, but he knew that any monster touching its power went mad, and many had fallen victim. Because of this, the association had placed a bounty on this being. Immediately, Jaehyun declared he wanted to join the mission to capture the Corrupted. Hotan said it was too soon, yet the protagonist insisted. In that case, Hotan decided to give Hurkan a chance. He instructed him to find a person named Ahimbri in Bangsu Castle, east of Figus Castle. He also promised to write a letter of recommendation for Ahimbri to teach Hurkan everything he needed to know. Upon receiving the letter of recommendation, the protagonist celebrated. This was exactly what he wanted. A unique mission like this, becoming Ahimbri's student, would surely make for an incredible video. Ahimbri was one of Grandmaster Bokan's 7 disciples. Every mage yearned to meet him, as he was known for distributing rare skill books. In other words, Ahimbri was an incredibly important NPC. Jaehyun thought he wouldn't have to worry about material for his next video anymore, but then he remembered something crucial he needed to do before leaving. So, Jaehyun headed into a forest and summoned his skeleton ally. Jaehyun recalled he hadn't properly checked the rewards from his last battle. He decided to use the werewolf skull he'd defeated to strengthen his skeleton ally. With a surge of power, the skeleton absorbed the skull's attributes, growing significantly stronger. Next, the protagonist equipped the corrupted tracker necklace, its effects instantly applying to him. With that, Jaehyun completed all preparations for his next mission. But before continuing his adventure, he tossed 2 more skeleton skulls onto the ground, and, through them, summoned 2 additional allies. His initial skeleton seemed shocked by this sudden expansion, but Jaehyun declared that from now on, the 3 of them would fight as a single unit, and he couldn't wait to see his new ally's strength in action. Soon after, Jaehyun stumbles upon a forest bear and is immediately attacked by the beast. But Jaehyun dodges the initial strike, only for the bear to lash out again. Jaehyun waits for the perfect moment and orders one of his allies to draw the monster's aggro. Instantly, the skeleton charges towards the enemy. However, the bear proves smarter than the skeleton, grabbing it and flinging it away. Jaehyun declares that such a predictable attack would never work, and his ally needs to strike the enemy's blind spot. So, he orders another skeleton to carry out the task. The skeleton approaches the bear and attempts to attack, but just like the first, the skeleton is countered by the monster. Jaehyun rages, seeing his allies fail to follow his orders, exclaiming, "This skeleton did exactly what the last one did." Amidst this chaos, the firstborn skeleton steps forward. Jaehyun's hopes ignite, believing this one will finally do it right. So his ally charges at the bear, attempting to strike with its sword. But just like the others, it too is defeated. At this point, Jaehyun is practically tearing his hair out in frustration. A while later, Jaehyun gathers all his allies and declares, "You guys must not have brains. You're reanimated skeletons after all." He then explains that normally, when attacked, monsters turn towards the incoming strike. That's why, Jaehyun says, you need to attack where the monster can't see, instead of hitting it head-on. However, Jaehyun realizes his explanation is falling on deaf ears, and he only grows more furious with his allies. Jaehyun admits it's great he can summon 3 skeletons at once, but the problem is they can't work together. All they know how to do is mimic each other's movements. And because they haven't learned to fight as a team, they don't know how to act like one. Plus, they cost triple the mana to summon. Even though Jaehyun reached level 20 as he wanted, it seems he'll have to put his video production on hold for a while. Instead, Jaehyun wants to train the skeletons for the Bangsu Castle mission. Jaehyun once believed that with 3 allies he could just watch them fight while he rested, but that's far from reality. Not only that, but Jaehyun won't be able to avoid the vanguard as he wished, because all the heavy lifting will still fall to him. Meanwhile, at the Bangsu Castle Branch Association, players are eagerly waiting for something, until one of them arrives in the main hall, sending everyone else into a frenzy. They demand to know what mission this player took, wanting to extract the information by force. Jaehyun witnesses it all and compares the others to hyenas scavenging for meat. He also thinks this type of person can be found everywhere. They don't even try their best. Instead, they prefer to act like parasites. A host tries to greet Jaehyun, but he completely ignores him. Jaehyun decides no one should know about his mission, so he goes directly to the person in charge and hands over his letter of recommendation. The official confirms the letter and authorizes Jaehyun to proceed. Others try to buddy up, hoping to tag along, but Jaehyun shuts them down. As he presses forward, Jaehyun's mind races, wondering what rewards await him. His main goal, however, is to forge a connection with a Himbri right off the bat. But when he finally reaches the wizard's chambers, Jaehyun is met with utter chaos, a colossal mess. Upon seeing him, a Himbri declares he has no appointment scheduled. Then he asks the adventurer who he is. Jaehyun introduces himself as Hirkan, explaining he has a letter of recommendation. A Himbri notes that Hirkan is a rookie, yet must possess serious skill to earn such a recommendation. Regardless, a Himbri hands over the rewards. Jaehyun is ecstatic with the rewards, 2 incredibly rare books. But to Jaehyun's shock, a Himbri declares their business concluded, wishing him a safe journey back. Jaehyun is stunned. It ended so fast. He'd expected the wizard to hand him a new quest, not dismiss him. He hadn't come all this way just for the rewards. Desperate, Jaehyun blurts out that he'll do anything to become an apprentice, practically begging for a chance. Upon hearing this, the wizard asks if Hirkan is serious. If so, the wizard has a task for him. The wizard then demands Hirkan retrieve an egg directly from its nest. But here's the kicker. The quest offers no reward, leaving Jaehyun utterly bewildered and terrified. In the same spot, another player approaches. Sporting incredibly expensive gear, the player immediately draws all eyes. He strides in, declaring, "So this is where Ha-Ho Mask is, huh?" Jaehyun curses his luck, lamenting such a pathetic quest from an NPC. He'd hoped for a grand main quest, not a measly, unrewarded egg-gathering chore. Confused, he questions if this mission is even worth his time, until someone approaches and asks about the mission. The moment they hear Jaehyun received a quest, players swarm him, a hungry mob. Jaehyun had completely forgotten about these vultures, and now finds himself trapped, with no escape from the surging crowd. Amidst the chaos, a figure emerges, demanding everyone clear his path. The mysterious warrior from before approaches Jaehyun, pushing the crowd aside. The warrior then asks if Jaehyun has a moment, as he wishes to speak privately. Annoyed, Jaehyun wonders who this man is. He's not interested in talking and rejects the offer. However, the warrior calls him Mr. Ha-Ho Mask and asks for his cooperation. Away from the others, the two stop to talk. The warrior apologizes for his initial approach, explaining he urgently needed to speak with Jaehyun and couldn't do so with others around. From the warrior's gear, Jaehyun deduces he must be a ranker, but he doesn't recognize his face. More importantly, Jaehyun wants to know how this guy knows him. Until he gets more information, Jaehyun decides to remain cautious. So, he asks why he was called Ha-Ho Mask. The warrior reveals he knows who Jaehyun is, and that he just received a quest from the wizard. Jaehyun cuts straight to the chase, asking who he is and what he wants. He also states he's not willing to waste time fighting. The mysterious figure stares at Jaehyun. Then, he says he made a mistake and apologizes. Jaehyun maintains his clueless demeanor and accepts the apology. Jaehyun leaves, saying that for now, he'll put this misunderstanding behind him. After Jaehyun walks away, another player speaks up, and the warrior from before says they might have found the wrong person. Only an inexperienced player would leave his watch exposed so carelessly. The other player comments that the corrupted Count's quest is almost over, suggesting they no longer need to watch the NPC wizard. But the warrior with glasses insists that the nest egg quest is the main mission, and they can't afford to make a mistake at this point. After that, each returns to their position. From a distance, Jaehyun watched everything. He noticed the warrior who approached him wasn't alone. Jaehyun concludes the two must be part of some guild. However, instead of offering a deal, as is customary, they took a different approach, suggesting they aren't from a common guild. What bothers him most, though, is not knowing who these players are. However, one thing is certain, Jaehyun discovered the egg quest is more than just a simple collection task. These players probably watched his video and came after him because of it. But by letting him go so easily, they must not care who Haho Mask is, but rather about the Ahimbri quest. Jaehyun doesn't know much about this quest, but he knows he needs to avoid drawing attention until he completes it. He was exasperated that more lunatics were still showing up to ruin his day. After all, his past enemies, like Chae Seolyeon, were already enough trouble to deal with. Speaking of her, Chae Seolyeon's secretary Park Suji appeared with a bottle of water. Park Suji asked about the guild's entrance exam. Chae Seolyeon replied it was a waste of time. All the candidates were incompetent. Chae Seolyeon then asked for an update on Haho Mask. Her secretary, Park Suji, said Jaehyun hadn't responded to their contact attempts, so he'd probably joined another guild. Furious, Chae Seolyeon demanded if Park Suji was sure. Park Suji admitted she wasn't, and her boss instructed her to investigate further and return only when she had concrete answers. Before Park Suji left, Seolyeon asked what the chairman had said. The secretary reported that the chairman hadn't responded yet. Seolyeon concluded that the chairman's silence meant Warlord was doing exceptionally well. She remembered the chairman had tried to arrange a forced marriage when she'd first mentioned playing Warlord. Regardless, Seolyeon instructed Park Suji to find a new batch of candidates and prepare a report for the very next day. Park Suji protested that the deadline was too tight, but her boss wouldn't hear any excuses and simply walked away, leaving her to talk to herself. Back to Jaehyun, he was in a different environment. He noted it had been a while since he'd last visited the lizard swamp. He believed the mission shouldn't be too far from the wizard's castle, and since he had to collect an egg, Jaehyun figured it belonged to some creature living in this very swamp. Since the monsters here were high level, Jaehyun decided it was best to use the skill enhancement he'd acquired. To do this, he needed to draw a mark and conjure the correct spell. With that, he activated the Helm of Madness on his skeleton. Immediately, the effects began to manifest on his ally. Jaehyun was positively surprised to see it, so to test if it worked, he ordered the skeleton to attack him. However, he'd forgotten there was a chance his ally could lose its sanity in the process. Upon receiving the order to attack its own master, the skeleton didn't hesitate and lunged forward. Immediately, Jaehyun realized something was terribly wrong. Regardless, he decided to stop the action, striking his own ally. This way, Jaehyun prevented anything more serious from happening and told the skeleton, "Don't you ever scream at your master like that again?" Jaehyun wondered if this strange behavior was some kind of bug, trying to process what had just happened. Lizards heard all the commotion and appeared, ready to attack the intruders in their home. Seeing them, Jaehyun declared, "The test subjects have arrived just in time." He activated the Helm of Madness once more, along with bone armor. With that, his 3 skeleton allies grew even stronger. The lizards braced for battle, and Jaehyun commanded his skeletons to attack. A fierce clash erupted instantly. It didn't take long for the skeletons to gain the upper hand, overwhelming the lizards. Soon after, every enemy was defeated. Jaehyun was thrilled to finally get a satisfactory result from his team. He declared that now he could truly hunt monsters while searching for the egg, no longer in a rush to complete the task. After all, Jaehyun wanted to evolve as much as possible, but as he spoke to his team, someone was watching him. This woman was Ilya, and she was utterly convinced of her own beauty. She believed everyone adored her no matter what she did. Because of this, her life had been incredibly easy. Whenever she feigned trouble, her slaves would instantly appear to help. But amidst her trek through the swamp, Ilya slipped and fell face first into a puddle. Furious, she declared, "I hate this place." Ilya had only ended up there because one of her slaves had brought her to level up. However, he had died, leaving the girl helpless and clueless. The monsters here were far too strong for Ilya to handle alone. When she spotted Jaehyun fighting, she immediately thought he was perfect to be her next slave. Next, Ilya got up and approached Jaehyun, pleading for his help. "I hurt my legs because of the monsters," she whined, "and now I can't walk properly." With this act, Ilya was certain the player before her wouldn't abandon a beautiful, helpless maiden, fully intending to charm him into helping her escape. However, defying all her expectations, Jaehyun simply turned his back and walked away, leaving her sputtering alone. Ilya was utterly shocked. She was not used to rejection. She tried to beg for help, but Jaehyun couldn't care less. At this, Ilya was absolutely seething with rage. Meanwhile, Jaehyun went back to fighting lizards, but he could barely concentrate. He knew Ilya was still following him. He had ignored her because he didn't want to waste time, but the girl kept trailing him everywhere. To Jaehyun, if a player decided to enter Warlord, they should, at the very least, know how to play the game. So, to finally end the distractions, Jaehyun decided to deal with the issue head-on. "What do you need?" he asked. Ilya claimed she'd lost her sword in the swamp and wanted help retrieving it. Jaehyun stated, "Once I get your sword back, you stop following me." She readily accepted and thanked him for the help, but in her mind, Ilya smirked, convinced her new slave was finally falling for her charms. Sometime later, they finally found the sword deep within the swamp. Jaehyun declared he'd retrieve the item, but only if Ilya kept her promise to go her own way afterward. He then commanded his skeletons to bring the sword. With that, the three pressed deeper into the swamp, heading straight for the weapon. Seeing this, Ilya inwardly cheered, her plan unfolding perfectly. She mused that necromancers were nothing without their summons. Once the skeletons were out of the way, their master would be utterly vulnerable. For daring to ignore her, Ilya lunged, attempting to strike Jaehyun from behind, but Jaehyun swiftly dodged the attack, scoffing that the girl was far too slow. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Ilya and hurled her away. She crashed into a stream deep in the swamp. Immediately, she began screaming at Jaehyun, vowing he wouldn't get away with this because her bodyguards would hunt him down. However, Jaehyun simply told her to stop screaming and look behind her because something was approaching. At first, Ilya was suspicious, but then she realized she'd landed right in a den of mutant lizards. As she scrambled to escape, Jaehyun coolly stated that Ilya should have thought twice before trying to trick him. After all, Jaehyun had seen through her intentions from the very beginning. He mused that he'd been tricked far too many times not to spot a liar. Besides, this whole ordeal was just a massive waste of his time. Glancing at his skeletons, Jaehyun found them acting strangely and sternly lectured them all, saying they should learn useful skills instead of bizarre behaviors. Moments later, the system alerted Jaehyun. Player Ilya had died. He'd received points for her elimination, which came as a surprise since he'd only thrown her to the monsters. Not only that, but Jaehyun figured the girl must have been bluffing about having bodyguards. However, Ilya's fanboys watching her livestream had seen everything unfold and were far from pleased with Jaehyun's actions. It didn't take long for things to get chaotic in the swamp. One of Ilya's fanboys appeared, ready to confront Jaehyun, but his attempt at revenge met with little success. Jaehyun stared at the boy seriously, asking why he was going so far for Ilya for absolutely nothing. Jaehyun pointed out that Ilya wouldn't even thank him, let alone talk to him or see him in person. Therefore, the boy shouldn't get so attached to someone like that. However, the boy merely laughed at his words. Then, he screamed, "I love Ilya! I'd do anything for her!" Jaehyun gets fed up with the nonsense and takes out the guy for good. He remembers Ilya trying to trick him earlier and realizes she probably pulls this stunt often. So Jaehyun doesn't regret what he did to Ilya one bit, but he never imagined Ilya was serious about her bodyguards. And now, more guys like this are likely to show up and confront him. Ilya, on the other hand, has her own way of charming her sheep. She convinces them to do anything. That's why lately crazy guys have been showing up to challenge Jaehyun. He was already itching for a fight, having found no missions. And now, as if that wasn't enough, more obstacles appeared in his path. Jaehyun would even love to hunt down that player and eliminate her again just for fun, but he's out of time and wants to avoid drawing more attention. However, Jaehyun takes the opportunity to grab items from the players he defeated along the way, and realizes the guy he just eliminated had some seriously valuable gear. Jaehyun even feels grateful that rookies like these came his way, because thanks to them, he'll make a good profit selling their items. Just then, another Ilya fanboy appears to confront him. This time, Jaehyun openly declares he's the one who eliminated Ilya, but Jaehyun quickly realizes a much larger group has shown up this time. In this situation, Jaehyun decides to run instead of facing them all. There are so many players, Jaehyun can barely count them, and he finds it really weird that so many sheep are willing to sacrifice themselves for Ilya. So instead of just running, Jaehyun decides to unleash his skeletons. Apparently this group already knows Jaehyun's abilities and came prepared to deal with his skeletons. Jaehyun realizes this group is on a higher level than him him, so he won't be able to defeat them with his current minions. With that, Jaehyun decides to make a clean escape and promises to find them again when he's at a higher level. After running hard through the swamp, Jaehyun decides to rest for a bit. He thinks it was tough shaking off so many pursuers, but he can't let his guard down now. However, by now, Jaehyun has no idea where he is, as this place looks different from the rest of the swamp. Jaehyun doesn't remember a spot like this, but he manages to reach a conclusion after thinking it over. Nearby, Ilya's sheep continue searching for Jaehyun, until suddenly they spot Jaehyun's skeletons dancing in the swamp mud. The players don't understand what's happening. Even so, they feel offended, thinking they're being mocked. So one of them charges towards the skeletons, but the player ends up encountering a giant monster. The player doesn't know where it came from and is terrified, but can't do anything as he's snatched by the monster. The other players, who witnessed everything, are desperate, as they just realized this monster is actually a dragon lizard, the swamp's boss. While they stare at the monster, Jaehyun stays hidden, observing everything. Jaehyun had already figured this had to be a lizard's nest. A dragon lizard is a boss with massive defense, health, and attacks. On average, it takes a group of 20 to 40 players to defeat it. But Jaehyun heard that the dragon lizard raid had already been completed, so this monster shouldn't be here. But if someone with a related quest steps into the zone, the monster can resurface. Which means if the dragon lizard is back, this must be the exact spot for the quest Jaehyun got from the wizard Ahimbri. Jaehyun knows his mission: defeat the creature and deliver its egg to the wizard. He just can't wrap his head around why he got such a high-level quest so early on. This makes Jaehyun furious at the wizard for handing him a quest he's clearly not leveled enough to tackle. But luckily, Ilya's cattle are already clashing with the beast, and who knows, they might just prove useful. But then, one of the players shouts for a retreat, claiming the monster is too powerful for their group. However, Jaehyun steps in, summoning one of his souped-up skeletons to block the player's escape route. With their path blocked, the players have only one choice: keep fighting the monster until they carve a way out. But the dragon lizard isn't about to make it easy for them. Meanwhile, Jaehyun seizes the chance to make his escape, silently thanking the cattle for the perfect distraction. Jaehyun has zero interest in fighting the monster right now. After all, his only goal is to get that egg to the wizard. So, Jaehyun pushes deeper into the lizard's nest, only to be startled when he finds no egg there. Desperate, Jaehyun frantically searches every corner until he spots something suspicious. Upon closer inspection, Jaehyun realizes it looks more like a rock than an egg. Suddenly, Jaehyun's system pings. His skeleton has been defeated. This can only mean the dragon lizard is heading back to its nest, and Jaehyun's time is up. Enraged, the monster storms back to its nest, searching for its precious item. Jaehyun scrambles to hide any way he can. With the dragon lizard back, Jaehyun can't risk searching the nest any further. So Jaehyun has no choice but to retreat with only what he's managed to grab, hoping it's what the wizard is looking for. Meanwhile, the group of cattle has been utterly wiped out. Jaehyun approaches, finding nothing but shattered remnants. He muses that Warlord is truly fascinating, with so many lunatics running wild thanks to the game's boundless freedom. Jaehyun scoops up the loot dropped by the defeated players, then declares he's about to make something crystal clear. Jaehyun states that he's been going easy on them until now, but unlike his opponents, he takes this game deadly seriously. He warns that the next time someone decides to cross him, they won't find him in such a forgiving mood. This warning goes out to that woman's followers, or anyone else for that matter. With his message delivered, Jaehyun departs. Once he's put some distance between them, Jaehyun vows to himself that if any cattle dare come after him even after that warning, he'll unleash total war on them all. To cool off, Jaehyun decides to hunt for some extra cash, especially since he found some truly interesting items during his swamp journey. Sometime later, Jaehyun brings the dragon lizard's item to the wizard Ahimbri. He tells the wizard it wasn't easy to get, and he sincerely hopes Ahimbri accepts it because he has no intention of ever returning to that map. Ahimbri scrutinizes the item, confirming it's precisely what he sought. Jaehyun cheers, having delivered the correct item. The mage praises him, admitting he was shockingly fast, far beyond expectations. Jaehyun simply states he gave his all, but now he wants to know, is there a next mission? Ahimbri then asks if the protagonist knows what that mysterious item truly is. The mage explains that he and his group discovered this thing while investigating the mutant monster zone, thus he's dubbed it the Stone of Corruption. For Jaehyun, this revelation explains everything, including why those shadowy figures were hunting him before. An item this crucial is undoubtedly linked to the main quest. Those players were desperate to ensure no one else got their hands on it, as it would severely impact their own progress. Jaehyun initially thought he'd been conned into this mission, but now his opinion has completely flipped. Mage Ahimbri admits he knew the mission was difficult, but he needed to test the resolve of a potential disciple. Now that Jaehyun has proven his worth, Ahimbri asks, "Are you ready to fight corruption?" Jaehyun sees this as a golden opportunity, not even considering rejection. However, Mage Ahimbri declares, "Jaehyun, you're not ready yet. Difficult missions like these aren't for rookies." Jaehyun instantly realizes his level is still far too low to proceed. Still, Ahimbri states he's willing to accept him as a disciple, if Hirkan, Jaehyun's in-game name, asks politely. A short while later, Jaehyun storms out of the mage's room, utterly annoyed. He hated the NPC's condescending approach and increasingly suspects Ahimbri is nothing but a scam artist. Some time passes and the very same dragon lizard is finally defeated. A formidable group of high-level players had teamed up to eliminate the threat. The guild captain gathers with the others to catch their breath. He approaches an allied player, remarking, "You're stronger than I expected, partner." The captain then thanks his helper for the crucial assistance during the battle. This helper, who once tried to corner Jaehyun, is now cleverly disguised among these lower-level players. The guild captain declares, "Without you, we wouldn't have won," and thanks him for accepting the task in exchange for payment. The captain, in turn, offered the helper a handful of gold, but the helper refused, stating it wasn't the promised payment and that he disliked breaking the rules of the game. The captain was stunned. Helpers always took money as a reward, but this one was different. Not to mention, the helper was a high-level ranker on a mission far below his current skill, only fueling the captain's curiosity. The captain told the helper he could keep anything he found in the creature's nest, as promised, though he warned there likely wouldn't be anything. The player, however, only cared about finding the corruption stone. That's why he took the quest. The helper had heard the lizard dragon reappeared and feared Heiho Mask would defeat it first, so he wanted to get ahead. Since that hadn't happened, he figured the corruption stone must still be in the nest. This player knew defeating a boss wasn't as easy as it seemed. He was more than capable, certain his reward awaited him. But upon reaching the nest, he found nothing. The helper was enraged. Someone had gotten to the stone before him. Back with Jaehyun, he was home, sensing it was time to turn his life around. Throughout his new journey, Jaehyun had often said that beyond his revenge, he also wanted to enjoy some quality food at some point. So now, he was determined to have a decent meal. Jaehyun had tried to save as much as possible as a precaution, but now that he'd secured the main quest with the wizard, he figured financial troubles were behind him. Jaehyun had also raked in a ton of loot from defeated players, so he figured it was only fair to get a reward after a mission like that. Checking his bank balance, Jaehyun imagined a juicy steak, but after paying off his debts, he was left with less than 1,000 won. That wasn't even enough for instant noodles. Jaehyun wondered why he was broke after all that hard work. Just as despair gripped him, he got a message from Romini, asking if he wasn't going to get back to his videos. He realized he hadn't talked to his editor in a while, and forgot to update her on recent events. After all, Jaehyun couldn't record because he wanted to stay out of the spotlight for a bit, since he was being watched. But then, he thought about it. Jaehyun didn't think it was fair to starve because of some weird players. He couldn't care less about that anymore, so he decided it was better to do what he had to, instead of hiding. With that, Jaehyun logged back into the game and prepared to face the challenge of the map called the Forest of the Dead. Arriving at the map, Jaehyun remarked that no matter how many times he visited, it always felt creepy. Still, this was the best place to level up fast, and its terrifying appearance would be perfect for attracting attention to his future videos. With that, Jaehyun told his allies it was time to hunt and introduced a new skeleton. He explained that magic would be part of his strategy from now on, so everyone better get along. One of the skills he gained from Ahimbri was learning to summon skeleton mages. The more Jaehyun leveled up, the better his creations would become. Jaehyun thinks this skill is great, but the skeleton mage drains a lot of mana. Anyway, Jaehyun gears up for the hunt. He announces their targets, enemy skeletons. Unlike his allied skeletons, these are much stronger. So, Jaehyun needs his allies to act as a team. But noticing his allies' hesitation, Jaehyun orders them not to stand around and to get into the fight already. He also explains that undead monsters are different from normal ones, so they shouldn't chicken out. However, his words don't motivate his allies. Jaehyun declares they have no time to waste. They need to start fighting ASAP. Just then, one of Jaehyun's skeletons charges, landing a hit on an enemy, but the enemy skeleton doesn't go down easily. Jaehyun explains, "This is exactly what I was talking about. Normal attacks won't work. So, my allies, you need to change your strategy." Jaehyun pulls a hammer from his inventory and shatters a few enemy skeletons as a demonstration. After that, Jaehyun instructs his allies, "You need to hammer their heads," but Jaehyun's skeletons skeletons are still terrified. Anyway, Jaehyun warns them that the goal is to eliminate 100 enemy skeletons in 100 minutes. That's 1 skeleton per minute on average. And if you fail, I'll abandon you right here. Fear gripping them, Jaehyun's skeletons quickly spring into action. After all, they don't want to be left behind. A while later, the team achieves good results, and Jaehyun looks satisfied. Jaehyun thinks his skeletons got used to the hammers faster than he expected. This means my next video is going to be a massive hit, he muses. However, Jaehyun is immediately caught off guard by a giant skeleton. This is a skeleton warrior, a rare monster that spawns randomly. But Jaehyun only cares about the rewards. More than that, he wants to eat steak. So, Jaehyun attacks alongside his team. However, distracted by his thoughts, Jaehyun is caught by surprise as the enemy attacks, nearly hitting him. Jaehyun barely manages to dodge, realizing he was almost crushed. Good thing he struck the enemy's arm earlier. Now, all Jaehyun needs to do is shatter the rest of the skeleton. With that, Jaehyun executes a coordinated attack with his team, then asks, "Is everyone alright?" The enemy rises after the blow and tries to ambush Jaehyun from behind, but Jaehyun smirks. "You're forgetting something, aren't you? One of my team members hasn't attacked yet." Jaehyun's skeleton mage prepares a magic attack, conjuring a fireball and launching it at the enemy, incinerating it completely. Meanwhile, Jaehyun can only think about the insane views this video will rack up. He's also dreaming of how he'll finally get that dream steak. But just then, his system blares an alert. The map boss has awakened, demanding vengeance for his fallen subordinate. Immediately, a portal rips open right in front of Jaehyun. From within, a monstrous creature bursts forth. But instead of fear, Jaehyun's eyes light up at the sight. He recognizes it, the Golden Skeleton, the boss of the Forest of the Dead. This is the first mage-class boss infamous for wiping out rookies. Jaehyun never expected to face this boss so soon. He's not even sure he can actually beat him, but he knows if he pulls it off, it'll make an epic video, so he figures he can buff his allies. Only when he looks back, he realizes he's completely alone. His mana depletion caused all his summons to vanish. Now, Jaehyun has to face the boss solo, and despair grips him. Jaehyun realized summoning all 4 allies, including the mage, had rapidly drained his mana. Now he has no choice but to fight hand-to-hand after all this time. He activates his watch, summoning his armor, and now he's ready for battle. The protagonist doesn't back down from a good fight easily, especially not when there's so much on the line, like that steak he's craving. Seeing Jaehyun advance, the enemy prepares, unleashing a barrage of magical attacks toward him. Jaehyun realizes a single hit would be enough to defeat him, confirming this boss isn't called the Rookie Killer for nothing. Plus, he can't let the enemy keep conjuring so much magic if he wants to win. He decides he needs to stop the enemy from casting spells. With that in mind, Jaehyun launches an attack. But instead of hitting the enemy directly, he strikes the boss's magic circle. He realizes the enemy's hands are directly linked to his spells. So he just needs to shatter the enemy's hands to incapacitate him. The boss was not happy about that. Even his system blares a warning. Now, the monster wants more than just revenge. There's pure bloodlust in its eyes, determined to crush the one who dared injure it. Jaehyun is bewildered, wondering what just happened. But instead of answers, he's met with a relentless barrage of attacks from the enraged enemy. His only option is to try and run. But Jaehyun realizes the attack is closing in fast. The strike slams into the ground, Jaehyun loses his footing and tumbles. He's cornered, with nowhere left to go. What's worse, he doesn't remember this enemy attack pattern. Does that mean his memory is betraying him? Or does the Golden Skeleton have hidden attack patterns? Either way, knowing the answer is the least of his worries right now. To make matters worse, his skeleton allies won't be back anytime soon. With no intel or backup, Jaehyun wonders how he'll ever defeat the boss. Gripped by doubt, his only option is to attack while he still can. So, Jaehyun charges the monster, figuring he can dodge its attacks as long as he knows their trajectory. The problem? He can't find an opening to strike. Without a blind spot, landing a hit on the monster is nearly impossible. Amidst his hesitation, Jaehyun is caught off guard, and the boss manages to capture him. Not only that, but the giant skull now wants to devour the protagonist. Jaehyun finds himself in a perilous situation, but he still has a trick up his sleeve. He unleashes a demonic curse on the monster, causing its attributes to plummet by 13%. The boss finally releases Jaehyun, who seizes the chance to attack. This was the opening he desperately needed. He even thanks the boss for making things easier for him. And without wasting a second, he smashes the monster with his hammer. The boss couldn't defend itself and took a direct hit. Just like that, the protagonist defeated another boss. His system announces his victory. Not only that, but it also reveals his level up from the win. Jaehyun sighs in relief that his strategy paid off. And checking his status window, he sees he's hit level 36. But Jaehyun knows it'll be dangerous to keep going like this. He witnessed what happens if he runs out out of mana during a crucial battle, so he knows that can't happen again. So far, Jaehyun has managed well, but he knows he can't rely on that forever. He realizes he can't just invest in his allies, because once they're not in battle, they're useless. On the other hand, the protagonist knows he's already gained all the mana titles he could up to this point, so he doesn't know where else to evolve. Plus, he doesn't have the money to upgrade his equipment right now, leaving him with limited options. For now, Jaehyun wants to send the raw footage to his editor to turn into a killer video, and he aims to hit level 40. Sometime later, Romani receives the files and immediately starts working on the video. But seeing what Hurkan did in his last battle, Romani calls him crazy for taking such huge risks. On the other hand, Hurkan defeated a boss that was a higher level than him without taking a single hit, something many consider practically impossible. At this point, Romani figures she doesn't need to do much, as the raw material is already incredible. So she decides it's best to send the final cut to the protagonist, and she thinks the perfect title for the video will be The Solo Emperor. Sometime later, Jaehyun returns to the Adventurers Association in Bangsu. There he finds the mage, who claims to be stronger than last time. The mage, in turn, finds Jaehyun's appearance odd and is curious about where he's been. Anyway, the mage hands over the promised reward. For completing the quest, Jaehyun receives a magic book. Jaehyun realizes the book is about osteology, an incredibly rare necromancer skill, impossible to find on the market. What's more, the mage also hands over the corrupted tracker's ring. He explains that he used the stone Jaehyun brought to craft the item. With this ring, the user can wield corrupted power to their advantage. Jaehyun's eyes gleam, knowing the importance of such an item. But as he reaches for the item, the mage says he can't hand it over to Jaehyun just yet. He states that his apprentice will have to earn it, and Jaehyun will have to take it if he can. Jaehyun realizes the mage isn't going to make it easy. So Jaehyun starts chasing the mage to finally claim the item he so desperately desires. Sometime later, Jaehyun has the ring and wonders why the mage acted that way. He thinks that if the mage weren't an important NPC, he would have already eliminated him. At least he got a new quest. Earlier, the mage had mentioned losing contact with an agent named Miggy and asked Jaehyun to visit Suryu Castle. Even furious inside, Jaehyun decides to let it slide this time. Jaehyun knows Suryu Castle is a very high-level area, so he decides to level up on his way there. Meanwhile, Romani contacts him, saying he just posted the latest video and Jaehyun needs to see something. Jaehyun checks it out and sees the video's numbers are mind-blowing. Not only that, but the earnings from it are skyrocketing too. Shocked, Jaehyun stumbles backward. After all, he'd never seen such incredible numbers before. But one thing is certain. With this money, he can eat whatever he wants. Jaehyun expected positive reactions to his video, but the results blew all expectations out of the water. He's so hyped, he wants to stop playing and just go eat right now. Everything else can wait. However, Jaehyun receives an unusual message. The leader of the Thunder Hunters Guild sends Jaehyun a recruitment offer. Obviously, Jaehyun knows exactly who this woman is, because in his past life, Chae Seolyeon relentlessly tried to recruit him. Due to his refusal, Hurkan became persona non grata and was intensely hunted by her and her guild. That's why Jaehyun doesn't even consider accepting the offer. Stopping to think, Jaehyun realizes he's acting exactly like he did in his past life. A flashback shows that once Jaehyun was outraged by Chae Seolyeon's persistence. He didn't understand why she kept trying to recruit him when he was already part of a guild. At the time, one of his allies said Hurkan was lucky because the Thunder Hunters Guild was one of the best, and being considered by them meant the player was incredibly skilled. Furthermore, the guild leader was the daughter of a wealthy family, and people who worked there often earned exorbitant salaries. His guild partner said Jaehyun was truly talented, and the videos they made always brought in good returns. Not only that, but his partner also said Jaehyun was too good to stay in a small guild. However, Jaehyun claimed he didn't care about wealth or fame. He believed his guild had potential and would likely grow over time, and that money would also come in gradually. That's why Jaehyun preferred to remain in his guild rather than join another. At the time, his partner couldn't convince him. Back in the present, Jaehyun realizes that even then, there were signs of what was to come, but he hadn't noticed. Even so, Jaehyun believes he didn't deserve to be betrayed by his companions. But Jaehyun thinks it's not the time to dwell on the past. He needs to focus on his goal and can't abandon the game now. After all, he'll have time to use that money later. Besides, it's too early to be satisfied when he can still earn so much more. With that, Jaehyun summons his skeleton companions again. He says that last time, he did all the heavy lifting, so Jaehyun will start a new training regimen with them to boost the entire team's effectiveness. Precisely so, what happened last time doesn't repeat itself. Jaehyun remembers that, in the past, his companions always slacked off during training. But now, his skeletons at least obey his commands. With this, Jaehyun believes he has everything he needs to make a difference in this life, so Jaehyun just needs to get stronger to achieve his goals. Jaehyun tells the skeletons their next destination is Churyu Castle. Along the way, they'll grow stronger. Jaehyun explains that the training is quite simple. Run until they reach the objective. But if anyone falls behind, they'll get a beating until they start running again. With that motivation, everyone starts running like never before, because they don't want to be punished. Far from there, Chae Seolyan reflects for a moment, until someone approaches and asks what she's thinking about so deeply. This is Hatch, an affiliate of the Thunder Hunters Guild. Hatch tells the leader that the meeting is about to begin. He also says the guild isn't progressing on the corrupted count mission and still hasn't found any clues for the next one. Chae Seolyan says she feels humiliated knowing the Hydra Guild got ahead of them on this mission. Hatch says the meeting is precisely with the leaders of all 30 top guilds, and they might discover something important. However, Chae Seolyan says there's no way such a meeting will be useful, but she'll be there. So, all that's left for Hatch is to wish his guild leader good luck. Back to our protagonist, the success of his latest video almost made him lose control with all the money he earned. But his hatred for Chae Seolyan brought him back into focus, and he decided to continue the game instead of abandoning it. Upon returning home, the first thing Jaehyun did was pay off all his debt to the loan shark. He wanted to get rid of that problem once and for all. Next, Jaehyun bought rare skill books to gain more advantages in the game. However, after spending all the money he earned, Jaehyun was broke again, as his bank balance hit zero. Although he only spent the money on necessities, seeing his bank account empty was still painful for Jaehyun. To shake off the frustration, Jaehyun focused on mastering his newly acquired skills. His first new skill was Skin Graft, an ability that significantly boosted his defense. Thrilled, Jaehyun immediately put it to the test. Paired with his Skeleton Warrior's Essence skill, his defense skyrocketed. Jaehyun then grabbed one of his swords and tried to wound himself. When nothing happened, he realized his defense was even better than he'd hoped. Next, he moved on to the Curse of Sloth. This skill slowed down its target. To test it, he cast it on one of his skeletons and instantly saw its future utility. Finally, Jaehyun moved to his last new skill. It was a golem summoning ability, the hardest one he'd acquired and the one he desired most. With a surge of power, Jaehyun performed the summoning, leaving his allies stunned. Jaehyun himself was ecstatic. He'd been waiting for this. He had finally summoned a golem. Gazing at his creation, Jaehyun declared, "A necromancer is nothing without a golem. This creation is more reliable than any tank I've ever known." What's more, the golem boasted a copy mode. Activating it would allow Jaehyun to synchronize his movements with the golems. He believed that combining the golem's raw strength with his own battle skills would make him unstoppable in future fights. However, when he tested this option, disappointment washed over Jaehyun. It didn't work as intended, making him suspect a game bug. But then, Jaehyun saw the golem move, throwing a punch, albeit with a significant delay. He quickly realized the problem lay in the golem's sluggish movement speed. This infuriated Jaehyun. After all, the entire game was built on a pay-to-win model. Meanwhile, the guild leaders' meeting was underway. Nergal, leader of the Ares Guild, thanked everyone for attending. Shev, the Red Buffalo Slayer, was also pleased to see so many familiar faces. Berg, leader of the Big Smile Guild, looked far from pleased to be there. And Chae Seolyan showed no satisfaction at all in attending the meeting. Berg grumbled that out of 30 invited guilds, only 4 had bothered to show up. Shev, however, countered that it was more than he'd expected. Nergal, the organizer, was genuinely surprised by the low turnout. He knew the top 30 guilds were locked in fierce competition, and a meeting like this was a rare event, let alone one with full attendance. Nergal revealed that the Hydra Guild had uncovered the corrupted Count's identity and was planning a final raid in a month. Shev admitted it was impressive that no other guild had even come close, putting Hydra far ahead of the pack. To make matters worse, Berg warned that Hydra could monopolize all future main quests, and if that happened, it would be game over for everyone else. Chae Seolyan finally spoke, telling Berg, "You and anyone else who's scared should just shut up." Annoyed, Berg shot back, "Are you looking for a fight?" But Shev and Nergal quickly intervened, reminding them that this wasn't the purpose of the meeting. Nergal then proposed an alliance against the Hydra Guild. If they all agreed, they would promise to cease hostilities until the corrupted Count's missions were complete and share all intel. Shev wasn't a fan of the these deals, but he saw no other way out, and he wasn't alone in that thinking. Even if they hated each other, there was no choice but to accept the alliance, and that included Chai Seolyeon. Later, at her home, Chae Seolyeon reflected on what had happened while taking a bath. She thought it was even more humiliating than she'd imagined. Not only had she failed to defeat the Chapter 1 boss on her own, but she also had to stoop to an alliance with rival guilds. But Chae Seolyeon knew there was nothing else to be done. After all, if the Hydra Guild completed the quest alone, it would be bad for everyone. Better to share the spoils with an alliance than end up with nothing. Concluding her thoughts, Chae Seolyeon decided it was best to wait for the next opportunity to strike. Next, Chae Seolyeon ordered all her guild members to keep a close eye on Hydra and report any suspicious movements. Victory was her only goal, no matter what it took. Back to our protagonist. Jaehyun found himself at the Adventurers Association once more. An NPC asked him to go to Bobaru Forest. The NPC explained that Agent Miggy had vanished there, so Jaehyun would likely find clues to his disappearance. But Jaehyun argued that the area was swarming with level 70 monsters, and at his current level, he couldn't even set foot there. However, the NPC insisted that Jaehyun, as a Himbri's apprentice, was perfect for the mission. But if he refused the task, he'd lose his status as a corruption tracker. After leaving the Adventurers Association, Jaehyun felt lost. The quest window flashed warnings about the dangers ahead. Plus, if he didn't accept, he'd lose everything he'd achieved so far. Jaehyun realized that taking on quests above his level to power level faster had completely backfired. He'd even completed tough missions before, but luck had been on his side until now. But by constantly accepting quests beyond his capabilities, the game had somehow prepared an even greater challenge. And the fact that Jaehyun couldn't abandon the quest only made his situation worse. Amidst his turmoil, Jaehyun overheard other players talking. They were saying the Hydra Guild was close to completing the main quest. The other 30 top guilds hadn't even come close. The biggest question among players was what would happen to the other main quests if the corrupted Count was defeated. Hearing this, Jaehyun had an idea. He thought he might not have to go to Bobaru Forest after all. Far from there, a group of players watched a castle. One of them cheered, saying the mission was almost over. He hated constantly watching that place. The other player was Natal, a commander of the Hydra Guild. Natal told his ally not to get ahead of himself. The mission wasn't over yet. They needed to keep monitoring the castle until the corrupted Count was defeated. Plus, they had to be discreet to avoid leaking any information. But then, another player burst onto the scene shouting. His name was Kim's, rank 3 of the Red Buffalo Guild. Natal demanded to know what a Red Buffalo member was doing there. Kim's declared that the mountain boss was high level, so he was going to defeat it, and asked if Natal and his ally weren't there for the same reason. Unable to reveal the truth, Natal said yes. However, Kim's remarked that they didn't look so good, but either way, Kim's would leave them to continue his mission. The sheer informality of this approach left Natal fuming. Next, Kim's contacts his guild leader, reporting he found the Hydra commander on site, which confirms their intel. Shev, the assassin, can't believe his ears. He'd received an anonymous tip about the corrupted Count's location and dismissed it as a lie. Yell warns that such valuable information, given freely, must be a trap, but Shev thinks it might be an inside job from the Hydra Guild, perhaps someone holding a grudge. Either way, they can't be picky. They have to work with what they've got. Kim's, in turn, asks if he can start a fight to buy time. Shev refuses, ordering Kim's to retreat for now. If this is truly the Count's location, a larger Hydra force must be nearby, and Shev can't afford to lose a good ally right now. Kim's, however, believes he's not important enough to be an enemy target, but his carelessness proved to be his undoing. Kim's was attacked, alarming his superiors. With a sword at his throat, Kim's reveals his guild wasn't the only one to get the anonymous tip. He announces the arrival of the Thunder Hunter's princess. This princess, Hahui, demands Kim spill everything he knows, or he'll be eliminated. Far away, a fierce bear prepares for battle. On the other side, Jaehyun's golem stands ready. The bear strikes first, slamming into the stone giant. After defending against the onslaught, the golem tries to counter, but its sluggishness prevents it from landing a hit. The bear turns it into a punching bag. Instead of focusing on the fight, Jaehyun wonders why everything is so quiet. Jaehyun had sent out emails with the Count's information, already knowing it from his past life, and was expecting replies. He did this believing it was the only way to avoid the Bobaru Forest mission. Once the Count is defeated, that mission will vanish. Warlord's main storyline consists of multiple chapters. Currently, the game is in Chapter 1, titled The Corrupted Count. When this chapter ends, along with the Count's defeat, all related missions are forcibly concluded, making way for a new chapter. Jaehyun knows he couldn't defeat the Count on his own, even if he wanted to, because he's still too weak. so he preferred to let someone else handle it. He doesn't care who it is. As long as someone defeats the Count, his plan will succeed. That's why he blasted the information to several different guilds. He wanted someone to respond, but instead, his system notified him that the Hydra Guild had started a live broadcast. Just then, his golem is slammed by the bear, on the verge of defeat, but Jaehyun intervenes, striking the monster. "I need to watch this broadcast in silence, so I don't want any noise bothering me," Jaehyun declares. With that, Jaehyun starts watching the live stream. A Hydra member announces they were the first to uncover the corrupted Count's identity and are planning a raid. They even have a date set. Jaehyun listens intently, hoping it's still this month. And when he hears the raid date, Jaehyun is utterly stunned. The Hydra Guild spokesperson reveals they've planned the raid for 3 days from now. Jaehyun is ecstatic. It's much sooner than he expected. He's so happy he can barely hold back his laughter. The golem's battle against the bear rages on. Meanwhile, Jaehyun figures the Hydra Guild must be in a hurry, knowing the intel has leaked. He doesn't care if Hydra defeats the Count. They've been ahead from the start and have enough players to clear the mission. All Jaehyun needs to do is wait for the mission to conclude, and things will look up for him. But everyone is stunned by how the raid unfolds. The news shocks everyone. The Hydra Guild has been utterly crushed. Watching from home, Jaehyun is in disbelief. He mutters, "If you're going to join a raid, at least prepare properly. Don't fail in less than an hour." Jaehyun realizes he overestimated Hydra. Now he needs to find another way. Right after he gets a notification for a Red Buffalo's live stream, Jaehyun knows their leader is Chev, the Slayer. Chev announces that Hydra Guild has apparently failed as the map is being reset. He tells his team this enemy is strong enough to wipe out an entire guild. Not only that, but he admits they don't have many reserve supplies, which lowers their success rate. Still, in the name of the Red Buffaloes Guild, Chev declares he'll accept the challenge. This fires up his allies. Jaehyun, however, thinks this is a terrible idea. Even if they're the Red Buffaloes, they're not as strong as the defeated Hydra Guild. But then, Chev announces he'll have a partner for this mission and introduces the leader of the Thunder Hunters Guild, the Thunder Queen, Sil. Jaehyun is absolutely floored by this. He never imagined Chae Seolyeon would agree to ally with a rival guild. A flashback reveals that while he was at his camp, Chev was approached by Chae Seolyeon. He said he hadn't expected her to request a meeting like this. Chae Seolyeon stated she had no ill intentions. After all, they were allies. For now. However, Chev countered that one of his own had been beaten by the Thunder Queen. Sil dismissed it as a mere setback, but insisted she was there to talk business. She'd heard Chev had received intel about the corrupted Count. Chev tried to dodge the question, but Chae Seolyeon claimed they had no time for games. She'd confirmed the same intel with other guilds before setting up this meeting with Chev. Chae Seolyeon also pointed out that Chev wouldn't be able to track down something like that alone, so he obviously had outside help. Cornered, Chev finally relented, but claimed he didn't know the source of the information. After that, Chae Seolyeon asked if Chev truly believed in the Hydra Guild's success. She didn't think they could win. After all, Hydra had rushed their raid, wanting to be pioneers. However, a main quest like this wasn't something to be tackled so hastily. Chae Seolyeon believed the smartest move was to let other guilds try first, then gather intel and formulate a plan. Chev then asked, "What exactly are you getting at, Chae Seolyeon?" Sil shocked everyone by plunging her sword into the table. Immediately after, she proposed an alliance between their guilds to tackle the raid as soon as the Hydra Guild failed. At first, Chev thought Sil was bluffing, but then he saw her unwavering determination. Back in the present, Chev realizes Sil wasn't just all talk. She's giving her all in the joint raid. Together, they manage to reach the Count. The Count, however, isn't fazed by these players. He unleashes all his monsters to confront the invaders of his home. Chev realizes that even with 2 guilds, they're losing ground. Still, he watches Sil fight to stay firm. Seeing this, Chev vows to protect her. He tells the Thunder Queen to advance, promising to clear a path for her. With that, Sil pushes forward, leaving Chev to cover her rear. But as she charges towards the Count, the enemy sneers, asking how Sil dares to confront him. He unleashes a barrage of attacks at her, but she dodges every single one. It doesn't take long for Sil to close the distance. Sil tries to finish off the enemy, but she's caught off guard, struck by the Count. The Count wouldn't be defeated so easily. He managed to ensnare his target in a trap. Seeing this, Chev grows worried. However, Sil hasn't given up yet. She gathers her strength, slicing through the tentacles that bound her. Now, she's more determined than ever to defeat the enemy. Sil closes in, getting close enough to strike. With a mighty swing, she cleaves the Count in half with her sword. Chev is thrilled to see her succeed. He remarks that Sil is even more terrifying than he imagined. Everything was broadcast live, and Jaehyun was shocked to learn that Chae Seolyeon had defeated the Count. He was furious, but tried to console himself that the important thing was the Count's defeat. No matter who took the credit, Jaehyun wished his enemy would enjoy it while she could, claiming the Count would be her last victory. After all, he believed that in the end, his revenge would be complete. In the Bulka's Mountains, Jaehyun embarked on an adventure with his team. He knew that after his revival, his greatest goal was to exact revenge on those who had eliminated him. That's why Jaehyun ventured into increasingly dangerous locations, seeking the strength to achieve his objective. Hours earlier, on the same day, Jaehyun and his team arrived at the entrance to the Bulka's Mountains. But they found a blocked field, realizing they could only proceed after fulfilling a specific condition. Jaehyun knew this area would only be accessible in Warlords Chapter 2. So, once the Count's main quest was complete, he was able to enter without a hitch. Upon entering, Jaehyun realized he was the first to pass through the barrier, becoming the pioneer of this new map. He believed his moment to shine had arrived, as exploring an uncharted map would make for great content. However, Jaehyun soon found himself face to face with level 60 wild boars. At level 41, Jaehyun had no choice but to flee. Back in the present, Jaehyun wondered why he had the misfortune of encountering these monsters right off the bat. He couldn't waste time either, as it was only a matter of time before other players arrived to explore the map. To try and turn the tide, Jaehyun sent his skeletons into action, but it was useless. His team was annihilated in a matter of seconds. Jaehyun wasn't surprised, stating it was merely a distraction. With that, Jaehyun unleashed his magic on the monsters, freezing them in place. Now all his targets were completely vulnerable, but to his utter misfortune, Jaehyun slipped on a banana peel, with no idea where it came from. Nearby, a monkey cackled at his fall. This was an armored monkey, a monster known for playing tricks on humans. Jaehyun vowed to go after the monkey, but forgot about the boars and discovered the hard way that his magic's effect didn't last long. Just as he thought he was about to be attacked, a light appeared at the end of the tunnel. Jaehyun was stunned to see an arrow strike the boar that was attacking him. Not only that, but all the monsters were felled by the single arrow. Jaehyun wondered how someone could defeat so many with just one shot. After the monsters were defeated, a hunter approached and asked, "Are you all right?" Far away at Suryu Castle, a group of players moved through the area when something caught their eye. Their eyes widened in shock. Another player was sporting the White Mamba armor set, an incredibly rare and expensive gear. What's more, they'd never seen this player around before. This player was none other than the Hydra member who had once hunted Jaehyun. He turned to his ally. "What did you find out?" His ally replied, "No guild has the information we need." After all, the intel about the corrupted Count came from an anonymous free source, making its origin impossible to trace. The player brought up Heiho Mask, but his ally shook her head. "He's just posting his usual videos, nothing out of the ordinary." Besides, she couldn't believe a mere rookie would have access to such valuable information. The player then declared he was heading to his next helper job at the Sweepers Guild. Meanwhile, he ordered his ally to focus solely on finding the person who leaked the information. Because no matter who they are, they must pay for shattering the game's balance. Meanwhile, Jaehyun was deep in conversation with the hunter who had come to his aid. Jaehyun knew this was none other than Ma Wung, the main NPC of the game's Chapter 2. Ma Wung was incredibly skilled, once serving as the prince's personal fencing instructor. But an unfortunate event led to his expulsion, and he eventually became the captain of the guards protecting the Bulka's Mountains. Jaehyun felt his luck had finally turned a corner by encountering Ma Wung. However, Ma Wung warned him, "You can't stay here. This place is crawling with nothing but monsters." For Jaehyun's own safety, the hunter urged him to leave these lands before another attack. But Jaehyun knew exactly how to twist the situation to his advantage. He simply stated, "The corrupted Count is dead, but even with the Count gone, corrupted monsters still roam these lands." He claimed to be tracking the source of the corruption, which led him to this very forest, and now he needed help to unravel the mystery. Ma Wung admitted, "I have some ideas about this, but no solid evidence." He then asked for Jaehyun's help to uncover the truth. This was exactly what Jaehyun wanted to hear. He immediately agreed to help. With that, Jaehyun received a new mission: investigate the monsters in the area. Jaehyun saw this mission as the perfect opportunity to level up. He decided to leave the high-level threats like wild boars and warrior bears for later, focusing instead on the easier monsters. That left one particular target, the armored monkey. Jaehyun vowed to make him pay for throwing that banana peel in his path. The monkey's forest is a treacherous place where many fall victim to its cruel pranks. But this isn't just any monkey. It's a cruel trickster monster that revels in the pain of its victims, laughing mockingly as they suffer. It lurks in the treetops, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to hurl banana peels at unsuspecting passers-by. However, amidst one of its latest schemes, the protagonist, Jae-hyun, appears and interrupts its wicked fun. Jae-hyun declares that the monkey will pay for its actions. With a fierce resolve, Jae-hyun begins his hunt for the mischievous monkey. But the creature is cunning, effortlessly evading his relentless attacks. The monkey is incredibly swift and knows this forest like the back of its hand. This only fuels Jae-hyun's rage. The dense canopy of trees makes it impossible for Jae-hyun to land a proper blow. He realizes he needs a new strategy. Jae-hyun changes tactics, opting for a long-range assault instead of closing in. He hurls his sword directly at the target. Seeing the blade flying towards it, fear grips the monkey, its panic clouding its judgment, almost leading to its demise. However, Jae-hyun's sword strikes a tree instead, causing the monkey to erupt in triumphant laughter. But Jae-hyun remains unfazed, revealing that the sword was merely a diversion. Immediately, Jae-hyun's golem lunges, smashing into the monkey's tree. Just like that, Jae-hyun achieves his goal. He finally eliminates the treacherous monkey and earns the prestigious title of being the first to hunt an armored monkey. With this victory, Jae-hyun decides it's time to hunt even more of these formidable creatures. Meanwhile, the world's attention is fixed on a single event: the two guildmasters who vanquished the corrupted count. These heroes are Shev of the Red Buffaloes and Sil of the Thunder Hunters. A reporter asks Sil if he has any words regarding his monumental achievement. With a charming smile, Sil humbly attributes his success to luck, promising to continue working hard for even greater results in the future. But as soon as she steps away from the blinding spotlights, Chae Seolyan's serious and focused demeanor returns. As they walk, Hahui praises her leader's performance, crediting Chae Seolyan for their group's survival and victory. Yet Chae Seolyan insists it was merely luck. She further claims their success was only possible with the crucial assistance of the Red Buffaloes Guild. Chae Seolyan, however, isn't dwelling on this victory. She's already concluded that for a truly complete triumph, she needs the skills of the Haho mask within her guild. Next, Chae Seolyan states she needs to speak with Hatch, but the princess questions why her leader would want to talk to that loser. Chae Seolyan simply replies that she needs to hunt something, and Hatch will prove useful for the task. Back with our protagonist, Jae-hyun is still relentlessly hunting monkeys, but his sword has been completely worn out in the process. He realizes it's high time to acquire new equipment. The only problem? He's completely broke. With no other options, Jae-hyun turns his attention to monster gems. These rare gems have an incredibly low drop rate from defeated monsters. However, they are essential for crafting powerful items, each possessing unique special characteristics. Jae-hyun knew the gems dropped by armored monkeys were perfect for crafting equipment. So he commanded his skeletons, hunt down every last armored monkey. 9 grueling hours later, Jae-hyun had hunted countless monkeys, but not a single gem had dropped. Desperation gnawed at him. He was determined to keep going until he found one. But then someone interrupted him, claiming he must be Haho Mask. Confused, Jae-hyun wondered who this was. All he saw was a player decked out in an expensive fire lizard armor set. Plus, the guy wielded an orc hero's sword, meaning this player was at least level 70. Jae-hyun began to suspect this might be one of those who had confronted him before. The player introduced himself as Kyote. Kyote then challenged Jae-hyun to a duel, explaining he'd heard Jae-hyun's videos were incredibly popular, and defeating him would bring a ton of views. Jae-hyun simply brushed him off, saying he wasn't interested. Jae-hyun was already fuming over not getting a single gem, and to make matters worse, some attention-seeking loser showed up to annoy him. However, Kyote pleaded for the duel, promising to pay 5,000 won if Haho accepted his challenge. Immediately, Jae-hyun's attitude shifted. Now, the duel seemed worth it. As they prepared for the duel, Kyote grandly declared himself the hero of justice. He believed his talent always put him in the spotlight in every game he played, but when he started Warlord, everything changed. No one paid him any attention. Ever since he started hearing about the protagonist, it had piqued Kyote's interest. He wanted to know who this Haho Mask was, and perhaps defeat the one who had stolen his beloved spotlight. Kyote also thought Haho had inferior levels and gear compared to his own, so he couldn't understand why someone like that got so much attention while he got none. Before encountering the protagonist, Kyote had been aimlessly wandering, desperate for the attention he felt he deserved. Then, by chance, he spotted Haho in the forest and was shocked to find the very person he was looking for. What truly caught his eye was Haho being in a blocked-off area, a place Kyote himself had only stumbled upon by sheer luck. At that moment, Kyote realized if he recorded a video defeating the famous Haho Mask, he could finally steal the spotlight for himself. Back in the present, Kyote removed his armor, leaving only his helmet. Jae-hyun, the protagonist, asked why he did that. Quixote replied it was to balance the fight, making it fairer for Ha-Ho. He believed Ha-Ho was inferior due to his low level, and he'd also noticed the protagonist's sword had just shattered. Quixote declared his desire for a fair duel, so no one could accuse him of winning solely because of his superior gear. He also warned Ha-Ho to give it his all because Quixote wouldn't hold back. Quixote gets tired of talking and lunges forward. The protagonist remarks that he can't take an opponent without clothes seriously. Regardless, Jaehyun deftly dodges the attacks. Quixote, fuming, tells him to stop playing defense and fight for real. Jaehyun retorts that his opponent needs to earn his seriousness. Suddenly, Quixote unleashes an ability, supercharging his attacks. He lands a devastating punch, sending Jaehyun sprawling. Jaehyun quickly realizes his foe used a booster, a warrior skill that grants a burst of speed. Not only that, but he sees that despite Quixote's idiotic appearance, he's on a whole other level. Facing him head-on would be suicide. Jaehyun gets back on his feet, deciding to test another strategy. Quixote, seeing this, declares that Ha-Ho is finally ready to fight seriously. Quixote then dares him to unleash his best, confident he'll overcome every blow. His goal, after all, is to flaunt his superiority to everyone. Tired of waiting, Quixote attacks again, using his booster. But Jaehyun retaliates, flinging dirt straight into Quixote's eyes. Even through his helmet, Quixote is momentarily blinded. In that instant, Jaehyun sweeps his legs. He knows his opponent is stronger, so his strategy isn't to match power, but to incapacitate Quixote, leaving him open for a decisive strike. After taking a few hits, Quixote snarls, calling Ha-Ho a coward. "Do you really plan to win by fighting dirty?" he demands. Jaehyun fires back. "This is a fight for survival. Unlike you, I don't care about honor. My only focus is victory, no matter what it takes." With that, he unleashes the recently acquired skills of the armored monkey, powering himself up. Instantly, Quixote knows, if that attack lands, he's finished. Jaehyun warns, "You asked for this, Quixote. Now face the consequences." However, at the last second, Quixote surrenders. He unleashes his devastating strike, but it stops just short of Quixote. Instead, the raw power dissipates into the surroundings. Terrified, Quixote had forgotten he was in a game, genuinely believing he was about to die. Meanwhile, the protagonist is ecstatic about his victory and ready to claim his reward. Jaehyun explains that a 2-day logout penalty is brutal, which is why Quixote surrendered just in time, spared by the promised payment. Quixote finally removes his helmet, admitting Ha-Ho is far stronger than he ever imagined. He concedes defeat and hands over the promised 5,000. But that's not all. Quixote also hands over his sword. Jaehyun is stunned. It's the hero orc's sword. Beyond its rarity, it boasts unique attributes, leaving the protagonist thrilled to receive such a priceless treasure. Quixote tells Ha-Ho to consider it a symbol of gratitude. He admits he was so blinded by popularity that he never truly pushed himself to become strong. Quixote adds that his fight against Ha-Ho opened his eyes, and from now on, he considers him a brother. Jaehyun thinks this guy might be an idiot, but he's got a good side too. Anyway, the protagonist declares he doesn't want to be anyone's brother and strikes Quixote. Not only that, but Jaehyun orders his skeletons to finish off the opponent. After taking a brutal beating, Quixote insists he still wants to be worthy of being Ha-Ho's brother and will grow stronger for it. He also says he's looking forward to the day they meet again. Jaehyun figures the guy must be crazy, but he's glad Quixote's at least enjoying the game. Regardless, the duel wasn't a waste of time. The protagonist earned money and a new sword, so he no longer needs to hunt monkeys. Now Jaehyun believes he has enough to take on his next quest. However, he still thinks he could hunt the monkeys, convinced he's close to finding one with a gem. His skeletons try to stop him, sensing their master's obsession with the gem. A while later, Jaehyun reveals his latest achievements. He had defeated 950 armored monkeys, 104 rabid wolves, and 76 venomous lizards. Seeing this, Manhwa praises Jaehyun's performance and says the investigation is progressing thanks to him. But noticing Jaehyun's distracted expression, Manhwa asks if he's paying attention. Jaehyun apologizes, explaining he was just imagining what to do with his recently acquired money. Manhwa tells Jaehyun to focus, as the next mission will be exceptionally dangerous. He explains that a warrior bear has appeared near the mountain summit. Warrior bears are colossal monsters that wear armor and behave like human warriors. Manhwa states the mission is to discover where these monsters are getting their equipment, as it would help uncover more about the corrupted. In other words, Manhwa wants Jaehyun to defeat one of the bears and bring back one of its weapons. plans. Manhwa acknowledges the difficulties and asks if Jaehyun can complete the mission alone. Jaehyun confidently says yes. After all, he knows how to handle these monsters. A short while later, Jaehyun is already on the mountain trail, but before continuing with the mission, he wants to spend some money. Jaehyun opens his system to the auction window, looking to buy an item suitable for his current level. He spots a skeleton serpent set and finds it perfect for the occasion. Without hesitation, Jaehyun buys the new armor set and equips it instantly. Jaehyun celebrates having money to spend and imagines buying magic books with the leftover amount. Meanwhile, his skeletons grow hopeful, wanting new equipment too. Jaehyun says he almost forgot about them and takes another look at the shop, but Jaehyun quickly realizes he doesn't have enough money to equip everyone. He's surprised he spent so much so fast, but unfortunately he'll have to leave his team without upgrades for now. His allies wouldn't take that well, of course. Jaehyun justified himself, saying it wasn't his fault the equipment was so expensive. Jaehyun spotted boar monsters and figured he could get more money by defeating them. That was all the motivation his team needed to charge in. A while later, only one boar from the pack remained. Jaehyun told his skeletons to finish it quickly. After all, if they wanted gear, they needed to hurry up. But then, someone else struck the boar first. Jaehyun was caught off guard. Someone then asked Jaehyun, "Who do you think you are, hunting here without permission?" They declared, "This area belongs to the Apollo Guild, and anyone who gets in our way is asking to die." The leader of the group introduced himself as Wang Zhang and threatened Jaehyun. Jaehyun, however, just thought they were a bunch of losers and immediately attacked them. Afterward, Jaehyun stated, "Don't bother me again." Thinking about it, Jaehyun realized he'd been attracting too many idiots lately and might need to do something about it. Regardless, Jaehyun decided to continue on his way for now. As he walked away, Wang Zhang snarled, "No one attacks our guild without retaliation." A while later, Apollo, the guild leader, received news that someone had attacked his subordinates, even after being told they were from the Apollo Guild. Apollo ordered one of his men, "Bring me this enemy, no matter the cost. I want to punish him with my own hands." Back with Jaehyun, he finally reached the bear area. Jaehyun declared, "It's time to hunt," but seeing his team wasn't taking it seriously, Jaehyun ripped into them. He explained, "Our target is a level 70 warrior bear with 3 phases. We can't mess around." Jaehyun added that being the first to defeat a warrior bear would give him a massive advantage over all other guilds in the main quest. So, Jaehyun expected his team to make no mistakes from now on. Immediately after, Jaehyun sensed the enemy approaching. After all, a bear of that size wasn't subtle in the slightest. So, Jaehyun prepared for battle, donning his full armor. Jaehyun's intention was to claim everything from the main quest for himself, leaving nothing for anyone else. Nearby, Hatch spotted the Bulka's mountains, hoping the Haho mask was still around. However, Hatch resented being sent to a place like this, believing himself to be an important person who shouldn't be chasing a mere rookie. Besides, Hatch didn't want to forcibly recruit anyone into his guild. That was a crime. Amidst his thoughts, Hatch was attacked by a boar. But as an experienced mage, Hatch incinerated the enemy. Hatch then thought he just wanted to finish the mission and get out of this place. Ballista Hatch was a respected ranker in his guild, and believed that should be enough for him to be assigned better tasks than this. Jaehyun remembers trying this exact raid 6 times in his past life with his guildmates, barely managing to defeat the monster. But this time, if he fails, someone else could snatch the main quest's leadership. To land a critical blow on the bear, Jaehyun knows he needs to target the armor's seams, leaving the beast vulnerable. Armed with this foresight, he'd prepared specific skills just to take down this bear. Jaehyun signals his skeletons, telling them to follow his lead. He's got a new passive skill, muscle modification. Once active, it lets him move at incredible speeds, but he's not used to this speed, overshooting his target and leaving his skeletons wide open. In a flash, the bear wiped them out. Frustration boils as Jaehyun's plan crumbles. He tries to recover, to harness the speed to his advantage, but this is a power he hasn't fully mastered. He can't wield it effectively against the enemy. The bear strikes, forcing him to abandon the muscle boost. Still, Jaehyun managed to rip off one side of the enemy's armor, yet he laments the skill proved useless. After all, he couldn't land hits on an enemy while moving slowly. All that's left is to dodge. Unable to go on the offensive, Jaehyun decides to attack from a distance with bombs. The bear takes the blast, but it only enrages him further. Jaehyun realizes this foe won't fall easily and gives up on direct damage. He heals up and summons his skeletons once more. His only option is to fight like a true necromancer. He tells his allies, this time, it'll be different. With that, Jaehyun seizes the chance to summon his golem. And just like that, the giant answers his call. The golem immediately confronts the bear. Much to its master's delight, Jaehyun quickly casts a spell, hardening the golem's body. This traps the bear's sword, which it used to attack his ally for a moment. Now it's the skeleton's turn to strike. Disarmed and exposed, the bear becomes a much easier target. But Jaehyun warns, this isn't the time to get careless. He adds, I still have an ace up my sleeve. Suddenly, both Jaehyun and the bear are hit by a magical fire attack. Annoyed, Jaehyun snaps that his ally was supposed to wait for him to get clear before attacking. Due to Jaehyun's distraction, the bear used a skill and recovered 50% of its health. Immediately, the bear charges. By now, Jaehyun is fed up with his strategies failing. He figures the best plan is always to resort to brute force. With a roar, he unleashes his most destructive bombs at the enemy, shocking even his own allies. In a blinding flash, Jaehyun finally defeats the bear. He thinks back. Last time, an entire guild couldn't do what he just accomplished alone. Brimming with confidence from his newfound strength, Jaehyun tells his skeletons that all he needs to do now is report back to the NPC and complete the quest. However, he soon realizes he's the only one celebrating. His skeletons, eager for more action, are visibly disappointed they weren't more useful in the fight. Meanwhile, at Bulkus's western base, Hatch is losing his mind in a tavern, utterly frustrated by his inability to find Heiho Mask. He's been scouring these mountains for days without a single trace of his target. To make matters worse, Haho just dropped a new video, drawing even more players to the mountain and making Hatch's job exponentially harder. Hatch knows he can't return to base empty-handed, but he feels it's completely unfair to search such a massive mountain alone for such an elusive target. At this point, he's seriously considering abandoning everything, even his guild. Just then, his boss calls. Hatch nearly jumps out of his skin. He was just cursing her name a second ago. He answers immediately, profusely apologizing for anything she might have overheard. But Syl says she's had a change of heart, realizing she gave Hatch an impossibly difficult task. After all, searching an entire mountain alone is too much for anyone. She figures it must have been incredibly tough. Hatch instantly imagines he'll finally be able to return to base and escape these mountains. However, his boss's solution is to send someone to continue the search with Hatch. Syl claims that with an ally, Hatch will find the target faster, and working together, they'll be more efficient. The catch? Syl sent the one person who absolutely despises Hatch. Hahui storms onto the scene, furious, declaring that Hatch's incompetence forced her to come all the way out here. Hatch's heart sinks. His situation just went from bad to worse. He curses the world for this twist of fate. Sometime later, Jaehyun notices Bulkus is far more bustling than usual. He knew it was only a matter of time before this happened. Now, he decides to head back to Mawung while he's still the only one who knows about the NPC. Mid-journey, however, he's intercepted. Several members of the Apollo Guild stand in his path. Jaehyun immediately assumes they're out for revenge, so he challenges them to attack already, declaring he has no time to waste. But the men rush past him terrified, screaming for help. Jaehyun doesn't understand their reaction. He hasn't even done anything yet. Moments later, he sees the Apollo Guild soldiers getting struck down. Nearby, he spots the culprits behind the assault. The princess of the Thunder Hunters Guild and her ally were hunting and just stumbled upon their main target. Jaehyun recognized them instantly, but he never expected to find them in the forest. The princess, in turn, declares she's finally found Haho Mask. Hahui is the Thunder Hunters number 2. Though known as the princess, some nickname her Chihuahua for being short and fiery. She executes every order from her guild leader Syl without question, even if it means descending into the depths of hell. The other is the Thunder Hunters number 3 Hatch. He's also nicknamed Ballista because he's a genius mage who never lets a target escape. Jaehyun remembered how both of them had relentlessly hunted him in the past, and the last thing he wanted was a repeat performance in this life. He figured they were trying to recruit him into their guild. Even though he wanted to wipe them out right then and there, Jaehyun wasn't strong enough yet. In that case, he figured his best bet was to talk his way out of it. So Jaehyun played dumb, claiming he had no idea who this Haho Mask was. He reasoned that without proof, they couldn't possibly confirm he was Haho Mask. However, the princess immediately called him a liar. Hahui declared there was no way he wouldn't know Haho Mask, especially being in the Bulkus Mountains, since most people were there because of Haho's videos. Not only that, but she pointed out Jaehyun's clothes looked strikingly similar to Haho's, only fueling her suspicions. But Hatch cut his ally off, stating they had bigger problems. Hatch called Hahui an idiot, reminding her she'd destroyed an inn upon arrival and eliminated several players just on suspicion, leaving a massive trail of chaos. Hatch stressed that their guild was renowned, so they couldn't just cause such a mess and expect no one to hold them accountable. With that, Hatch demanded Hahui apologize for her actions so they could continue their mission without further trouble. Reluctantly, Hahui apologized and asked if the mage was satisfied. Hatch also apologized to Jaehyun, regretting his colleague's behavior, and asked for permission to proceed. Jaehyun thought he was finally out of the woods, but then a fist slammed into his face. Hahui had tricked him. She'd feigned leaving, only to return and land a powerful punch, sending Jaehyun flying. Desperate, Jaehyun struggled to understand why Hahui had done it. The princess, in turn, justified herself by saying she thought he would dodge the attack. Jaehyun then demanded to know if they usually attacked innocent, unsuspecting players. He declared he would file a formal complaint against the Thunder Hunters Guild. Furthermore, he'd make a public post exposing them, ensuring everyone knew the Thunder Hunters attacked other players just for fun. However, Hatch quickly interjected, saying there was no need for that, and he could compensate for the damages with money. Jaehyun accepted, stating he'd let it slide this time. After that, Hatch told Hahui they needed to leave before she caused any more trouble. Jaehyun, for his part, seethed at being attacked. But for now, he preferred to maintain appearances rather than reveal himself by attacking them both. After all, he just needed a little more patience before he could exact his revenge. Far from there, Hatch reprimanded the princess for her actions, stressing the need to maintain the guild's reputation. But Hahui argued that players usually dodged such an attack instinctively. Hatch asked if she was blaming Jaehyun for not dodging her attack. The princess denied it, but pointed out that Jaehyun had only seemed annoyed by what happened, which she found highly suspicious. Regardless, Hatch pleaded with Hahui to behave from now on, insisting she not try anything like that again. Sometime later, Jaehyun went to Ma Wung, bringing a piece of the bear's armor. Ma Wung confirmed that something strange was indeed happening, and thanked Jaehyun for his help, admitting he wouldn't have discovered it without him. However, Jaehyun only cared about the next mission and was incredibly anxious, desperate not to be overtaken by other guilds. Anyway, the NPC appeared with a box and told Jaehyun to choose one of the items. Ma Wung explained these were maps he'd created for monster dungeons. To Jaehyun, this meant they were treasure maps, and by choosing one, he could go after the rewards. But as he handed over one of the maps, Ma Wung said he wanted a favor in return. Jaehyun immediately realized it wouldn't be as easy as he'd thought. The NPC revealed he'd heard rumors of armed monsters appearing in regions beyond the Bulkas Mountains, and needed Jaehyun to investigate. Jaehyun asked where he should look. Ma Wung said it was the Purung Forest, but seeing Jaehyun's expression, he realized he didn't like hearing that. Indeed, Jaehyun wasn't thrilled, but he agreed to go anyway. Outside, Jaehyun muttered that this place required level 90 to explore, meaning he'd have to level up on the way there. Jaehyun starts devising a plan to level up fast. He figures after defeating the warrior bear, he's ready for any challenge to gain levels. But amidst his thoughts, an unexpected visitor arrives. Shev, the Slayer, approaches Jaehyun and asks if he remembers him. Sometime later, Hatch calls his boss. He says he can't stand working with the princess anymore, but insists he's not giving up on the mission. Hatch warns that the Red Buffaloes have already taken control of Sura Canyon, and thinks it's better to drop this and focus on the main objective. After all, he doesn't want to keep trying to recruit someone who doesn't want to be their ally. Syl considers this and allows them to focus on the main mission, leaving Heiho Mask aside. But personally, she hasn't given up on recruiting him, believing the strongest are destined to meet. She believes Haho won't be able to run for long, so she just needs patience to find him. A while later, Jaehyun encounters a level 75 demonic goat, but he quickly deals with it, having put his skeletons to work. With that, Jaehyun celebrates finally reaching level 62 and believes he just needs to keep this up to soon head to Purung Forest. Meanwhile, several other players watch Jaehyun fight. These are Haho Mask fans, trying to get noticed by him. Obviously, Jaehyun hates this and tries to escape the unwanted attention as fast as he can. Jaehyun has been dealing with this more often than he'd like, as his videos are becoming increasingly popular. Despite enjoying the numbers and results, Jaehyun still hasn't gotten used to other players wanting to watch his next moves live. Because of this, he's surrounded every time he goes hunting and can barely progress due to the sheer number of players around him. So Jaehyun decides it's best to head to Sura Canyon right away, believing the high-level monsters there will deter people from following him. However, halfway there, he runs into Shev, the Slayer, who is thrilled to finally meet Jaehyun again. But for Jaehyun, this was the last thing he needed. Shev says Jaehyun is the guy he met in the starting village a while back, and he hasn't forgotten that day. After all, it's not every day he gets humiliated like that. Not only that, but Shev notices Jaehyun has evolved incredibly fast. Just a few months after their encounter in the starting village, he finds Jaehyun about to enter Sura Canyon. In turn, Jaehyun states that this canyon offers no challenge for a player like Shev, so he asks what he's doing there. Shev replies that his guild started taking control of Sura Canyon overnight, thinking it would be a good idea to have a base near the main mission. Not only that, but Shev had a hunch that Haho Mask would pass through this area, which is why he decided to wait at the entrance. Shev explains that after watching Haho's video defeating the warrior bear, he heard rumors of Haho being in the vicinity, so he's just strolling around. Then, Shev asks if Jaehyun is also curious about the identity of Haho Mask. Jaehyun quickly denies it and bolts from the spot. Once he's put some distance between them, Jaehyun wonders why everyone is suddenly after him. First Sil, now Shev, two powerful guild leaders are hunting the same person, Haho Mask. Jaehyun realizes that at this rate, he'll never level up as he needs to, and he can't just leave the region because his crucial quest is right here. Amidst his growing frustration, Jaehyun remembers the map he received from Mawung. He recalls it was a dungeon map, and this could be his perfect escape. Rare dungeons are usually hidden in inaccessible places, but with a map, everything changes. Upon reaching the designated spot, Jaehyun knows it won't be easy, but he believes the potential rewards are worth the risk. At least, he hopes so. He then takes a deep breath and dives, as his destination lies beneath the water's surface. As he swims deeper, he spots a hidden cave entrance. But the entrance is still too far, and fear grips him as his lungs burn, threatening to give out before he can reach it. But in the absolute last second, Jaehyun bursts into the cave. He's made it. The secret dungeon, marked on his map, is finally before him. Jaehyun figures the best way to escape prying eyes is to go somewhere utterly untraceable, and that's exactly what he's done. After all, this is a hidden dungeon, accessible only with a specific map, a map that, for now, only he possesses. Plus, he expects to find unique monsters here, likely powerful foes that will push him to his limits. After a short walk, Jaehyun spots something and feels a surge of apprehension, wondering what awaits him. However, his excitement quickly deflates when he sees it's just a measly slime. He'd been expecting something far more formidable. Furious, Jaehyun mutters, "Why is there only a pathetic slime in a hidden dungeon like this?" But then, the slime begins to morph, its form twisting as it emanates an intense, fiery glow. Jaehyun immediately suspects a spirit monster is nearby. These types of monsters are incredibly rare in Warlord. Their drops are crucial for crafting elemental artifacts, making them highly sought after. This means Jaehyun could get seriously rich by selling just one of their drops. Without hesitation, Jaehyun commands his skeletons to attack. But as the slime senses danger, it lets out a piercing cry for help. The cavern begins to tremble violently, and right beside the slime, a massive flaming salamander erupts into existence. Jaehyun is utterly terrified. To make matters worse, the salamander immediately spews a torrent of fire in his direction, forcing Jaehyun and his team to scramble for cover and flee. Jaehyun couldn't believe an attack of this scale was happening in such a confined space. To prevent things from escalating, he had no choice but to resolve the situation fast. Luckily, Jaehyun had a trick up his sleeve. He activated the Helmet of Madness magic, combined it with bone armor, and then finally, the Black Orc Skull, an item Jaehyun had spent a fortune on, was applied to one of his skeletons. With everything combined, Jaehyun forged a powerful skeleton knight and commanded his new ally to confront the enemy. His knight charged the salamander. Before it could even react, the skeleton knight struck, obliterating both the salamander and its slime minion. Jaehyun was thrilled to finally have such a formidable ally under his command. No sooner had the first salamander fallen than a new horde surged forward. The horde charged straight for Jaehyun, but Jaehyun remained unfazed. After all, he had a powerful ally by his side. He simply ordered his skeleton warrior to attack. In an instant, his skeleton effortlessly wiped out the entire enemy horde, and Jaehyun's system flashed a victory alert. His newly upgraded skeleton was admired by the others. However, Jaehyun could only think about how much easier his future battles would be. Now that he'd upgraded one of his skeletons, Jaehyun could send it to fight in his stead whenever needed, allowing him to rest and watch. Not only that, but the salamander essence Jaehyun collected proved far more valuable than he'd anticipated. Jaehyun realized it was only a matter of time until he could perform the same upgrade on all his skeletons, building his very own army. Next, Jaehyun decided they needed to press on, defeat the boss, and then finally head to Purung Forest. However, Jaehyun's joy was short-lived. He stumbled upon an instant dungeon portal, and a thought crossed his mind. His journey had been far too easy to be true. Jaehyun knew there was no way to predict what lay on the other side, and once inside, there was no turning back until the dungeon was cleared. Worry gripped Jaehyun. Failure meant 2 days without playing, a setback he absolutely couldn't afford, as it would give his rivals a massive advantage. Yet Jaehyun realized there was nowhere else to go for now. He saw no other choice but to enter the instant dungeon. And so, Jaehyun stepped into the dungeon, relying solely on his luck. After some time, Jaehyun's system alerted him. He had entered the throne room. Jaehyun noticed knight statues all around, reminding him of an abandoned temple. What made it even stranger were the blade marks scarring every single statue. Then, Jaehyun was stunned. He saw an enemy seated on the throne. Judging by the entire scene, this could only be the boss. Jaehyun tried to warn his skeletons to enter defense mode, but in a matter of seconds, they were all defeated. Jaehyun was caught completely off guard. He hadn't expected anything like this. After all, Jaehyun recognized this enemy enemy from his past life, a spirit knight. This monster was equipped with Warlord's most advanced battle AI. In his past life, Jaehyun faced this very same enemy, and it was roughly at his current power level. Back then, Jaehyun even had his entire old guild by his side. Yet, Jaehyun and his allies were utterly wiped out. He had no choice but to give up. But now, Jaehyun knows he can't afford to repeat history, so he uses his powers to rally his team. With everyone ready, Jaehyun commands them to unleash everything they've got from the very start. The enemy doesn't stand idly by, striking down one of the weaker skeletons. Seeing this, Jaehyun knows he needs to go all out. Alongside his warrior skeleton, he launches himself at the foe. Meanwhile, a smaller skeleton flanks the monster from behind, landing a hit on its back. But the expected result? No dice. Jaehyun snaps at his ally, yelling, "Get out of there now!" But the warning comes too late, and the skeleton is blasted head-on. Jaehyun realizes the enemy was critically struck, yet it shrugged it off. Instead, the monster activated its defense mechanism, pushing them back. At this point, Jaehyun understands that normal skeletons or golems will be useless against this beast, leaving him stumped on how to proceed. Amidst this chaos, Jaehyun flashes back to his past. He was once asked why he attacked a monster 4 times his strength. Jaehyun admitted he didn't really know. He just thought he wouldn't get dinner if he didn't defeat the enemy, so he attacked. His old ally was absolutely stunned by that answer. Snapping back to the present, Jaehyun realizes he's never been a cold, calculating type. From his past life, his actions were always impulsive, and it's no different now. So, he concludes, if he can't land a critical blow, he just needs to chip away at the enemy until it falls. With that resolve, Jaehyun unleashes a furious assault, hoping to secure victory. But the enemy suddenly outpaces Jaehyun, swinging its sword to strike him down. Just when the foe thought it had him, Jaehyun surprises it, declaring, "You're not as fast as you think." Immediately after, the warrior skeleton strikes the enemy from behind, and with a precise blow, manages to disarm the monster. Jaehyun realizes he's finally made a breakthrough. Now he just needs to keep up the intense fight so he can enjoy a peaceful dinner. Over in Sura Canyon Village, Chev remarks that this place is thriving better than expected. Yell explains it's all thanks to their guild's control over the area. Plus, they've secured a solid supply route to ensure nothing runs out. Hearing this, Chev muses that maybe they've done enough for the Haho mask to finally show up. His ally tells him Chev is obsessed with this guy and doesn't understand what's so special about hunting low-level monsters. Chev explains that for them, seasoned players, these monsters are low-level. But for Haho, he faced enemies way out of his league and still won. Chev adds that in this game, only 2 kinds of players pull that off: lunatics or natural-born warriors. And to Chev, Haho is both, which is why he's so captivated by him. Back to our protagonist, the enemy, wounded, summons a new arm of fire to replace the original. Jaehyun finds this infuriating. Now he'll have even more work to do to defeat him. Still, Jaehyun charges into the fray once more, his ally right beside him. In turn, the enemy unleashes an attack with his new arm, causing a massive explosion that rips through the landscape. Jaehyun is forced to pull back from the chaos, deciding he needs to be far more cautious. After a moment, Jaehyun lunges forward, hoping to strike the enemy, and indeed, he lands a hit. Jaehyun's ally strikes as well. Together, they execute a perfectly coordinated assault. Jaehyun thinks this is brilliant. His strategy is working, and he just needs to keep this up to secure victory. However, the enemy doesn't take kindly to being hit. Enraged, he unleashes another area attack, triggering an even bigger explosion. Jaehyun realizes the enemy has grown stronger. Not only that, but the monster's assaults are becoming increasingly perilous. The enemy has completely shifted his attack style, adapting rapidly to his adversary. Because of this, Jaehyun knows he can no longer delay his victory. Jaehyun commands his ally to attack with even greater intensity. Suddenly, Jaehyun is caught off guard by an enemy blow that sends him hurtling across the arena. Lying prone, Jaehyun realizes he focused too much on controlling his skeletons and completely neglected his own defense. This lapse in judgment made him an easy target. But just as Jaehyun was about to be struck down, his ally intervenes, taking the devastating blow in his stead. Jaehyun is stunned. He never expected to witness such a sacrifice. Regardless, his ally served his master to the very end, granting Jaehyun a new chance to continue the fight. Enraged, Jaehyun springs to his feet and hurls a barrage of bombs at the enemy. The foe is hit, but incredibly, he remains standing. So, Jaehyun returns to close quarters combat, thinking he just needs to endure a little longer. Jaehyun unleashes more bombs, but it's not enough. He has to keep going. But the enemy strikes back, surprising him again, charging straight at Jaehyun, intent on finishing him off for good. Jaehyun explains that spirit monsters aren't easily damaged by magic, and he knew this when he launched his attack. That's why he mixed fragments of his fallen skeletons into the bomb's magic. With a surge of power, he activates his skill for a maximum skeleton summon. Jaehyun believes this is the monster's end. There's no escape this time. With a precise strike, Jaehyun lands a direct hit on the enemy. Immediately, his system confirms his victory. And then, a level-up notification flashes. For a brief moment, Jaehyun remembers how his past team blamed him for their defeat against the Spirit Knight. But now, he has allies who support him instead of judging him. Even though they aren't human, his skeletons prove more loyal than many people he's met. He realizes this life is vastly different from his previous one. Jaehyun takes a moment to thank his team for their performance. But even after defeating the boss, the dungeon exit hasn't appeared. He suspects there might be another enemy lurking nearby. Something catches Jaehyun's eye. He spots an opening to a randomly appearing reward room. Jaehyun immediately dashes towards it, grateful for this unexpected chance. Excited, Jaehyun wonders what he'll get for defeating such a tough monster, but he's surprised to receive only an old book. He recognizes it as a research logbook about an ancient power. It's not entirely bad, but he's already read this book in his past life. He even memorized it. This makes the item useless to Jaehyun, and he laments not getting gold or equipment instead. However, he then spots something shining and wonders what it could be. Sometime later, Jaehyun is already in the Purung forest. He figures he's leveled up enough, and now it's time to return to the main quest. Not only has Jaehyun grown stronger, but his team has too. After all, he gave all his allies a significant upgrade, and now Jaehyun notices everyone is incredibly hyped. Jaehyun thinks he can't blame them. Even he didn't expect to find that in the reward room. Jaehyun discovered a skill that lets him equip his own gear onto his summons, meaning he can continuously upgrade both his equipment and his allies. This didn't come cheap. Jaehyun had to spend a fortune on better gear, but Jaehyun believes it will be worth it in the end, telling his skeletons, "Make it count." Amidst all this, some players appear, congratulating Haho Mask on his achievements, saying he's exactly as the rumors describe. They declare, "We live for romance, and we die for romance, for we are the outlaw romantics, also known as the R2 family." Jaehyun, for his part, concludes that he's encountering more and more weirdos in the game. It's moments like these that make him consider logging off for a while. Jaehyun tries to go about his business normally, but the romantics group follows him, saying, "Haho, you're walking too fast." They ask Jaehyun to slow down a bit. "Otherwise, we won't be able to keep up with you for long." Furious, Jaehyun snaps, "Leave me alone." However, the romantics insist that Jaehyun still hasn't answered if he'll accept their guild's offer. They explain that the R2 guild is training to reach level 100 and then enter the Purung forest. But they claim the monsters are too strong, beyond their capabilities. That's why they're looking for strong people to recruit into the guild. And they ask, "Why won't Haho join us?" The romantics persistently try to convince Jaehyun, claiming that only someone as strong as him can keep the guild's romance protected. Sometime later, Jaehyun settles the score. He thrashes the players, declaring he'd never join them and couldn't care less about their romance nonsense. Jaehyun also warns them he works alone, and if they ever follow him again, he won't go easy on them like this time. After Jaehyun leaves, the players lament his refusal, seeing him as their guild's last hope against the Toon Guild. That rival guild had trapped them in a tree just because they thought they were weirdos. But now, one of the romantics reveals the Toon Guild is actually asking for help. Back to Jaehyun, he's facing a new enemy. This time, it's a giant ogre. However, Jaehyun isn't alone. His team is with him, and together they charge the enemy. With a single strike, Jaehyun obliterates the monster. He's far stronger than before. Not only that, but Jaehyun has already taken down over 50 ogres just like it. Ever since he defeated the Spirit Knight, most monsters have become trivial for Jaehyun. Jaehyun doesn't mind. After all, he's evolving rapidly. Amidst all this, Jaehyun remembers receiving a quest to find traces of armored monsters in the forest. However, he hasn't found any such monsters yet, nor has he made progress on the main quest. Jaehyun knows he can't waste time. Other guilds have already started the main quest and could complete it soon. In that case, Jaehyun realizes he needs to gain an advantage and considers perhaps asking for information from those who approach him before beating them up. Still, Jaehyun would rather log out of the game than work with the idiots from the R2 guild. Suddenly, Jaehyun hears an explosion and wonders what kind kind of monster could cause such a massive commotion. But then, an idea strikes Jaehyun, and he thinks he can turn this situation to his advantage. Not far from there, members of the R2 Guild are in a fierce battle. They were ambushed by a horde of armored ogres and now have no idea how to cope. These monsters are simply too strong for them. What's more, their armor is incredibly tough, making the situation even harder. But beyond the vast army of enemies, a larger ogre commands the rest. A monster intelligent enough to command an army is truly unprecedented. Regardless, the group's leader orders a coordinated attack. Immediately, the leader's team summons a wall of fire to slow the enemy's advance. The others express their concern to the leader. They're protecting the heavily weakened Toon Guild and believe Toon won't last much longer. They conclude the best strategy would be to retreat while the R2 Guild can still stand. The leader agrees that's the most sensible course of action. He recalls once asking the Toon Guild for help, but they left them high and dry, refusing to join a bunch of weirdos. Even so, the leader decides to help. So, the leader tells his companions to use all their remaining mana to create an escape route and flee with the Toon Guild. The leader states they know all too well what it's like to be abandoned when you need help. Therefore, the leader refuses to abandon those who need them, even if it's the Toon Guild. Then, the leader tells his companions to go help the Toon Guild members while he holds off the enemies. The leader charges forward, declaring he won't let anyone past him. He attacks one of the monsters, thinking he just needs to hold on long enough for the others to be safe. But then, the leader gets struck head-on by an enemy and realizes he's no match for these monsters. With death staring him down, he knows he isn't strong enough to win. But amidst the despair, a light appears at the end of the tunnel. Jaehyun arrives, immediately calling out the leader's foolishness. However, Jaehyun makes it clear he isn't there to save him, so the leader shouldn't get the wrong idea, and definitely shouldn't try to steal Jaehyun's monsters. Jaehyun quickly takes control, unleashing his skeletons into action. His group attacks the armored ogres. Seeing this, the R2 leader wonders, can familiars really move like that? He realizes Haho is no ordinary necromancer. His skills are out of this world. This only fuels the curiosity about who Haho truly is. Jaehyun wasn't there to chat. He leaves his group to handle the monsters and quickly defeats the ogre squad. But now, Jaehyun faces the army leader. He tells the enemy, don't mourn your army too much because you're about to join them. Before that, Jaehyun orders his skeletons to clear the other players out of the way. Challenged, the monster charges forward, glaring at the protagonist, consumed by hatred over what happened to his army. The R2 Guild leader, however, doubts Haho's victory, deeming the monster far too powerful. Just then, a Toon Guild member chimes in, pointing out the monster's black and red eyes. They signify it's corrupted, tied to the main quest. Corrupted monsters are typically 3 times stronger than normal ones. So, even with Heiho's fame for taking down tough foes, the Toon member believes he won't win this one. Haho, in turn, attacks the enemy and immediately feels its immense resilience, confirming it's far stronger than its minions. As the other players watched the fight, fear gripped them for Haho. A monster this dangerous could easily wipe him out. A player from the Toon Guild insisted Haho stood no chance and should retreat. But defying all expectations, Haho charged straight at his opponent, practically daring it to stop his attack. With a single precise strike, Haho's sword tore through the enemy's body, as if its thick flesh was nothing. The armored giant immediately crashed to the ground, and every player present witnessed the awe-inspiring power of masked Heiho. Jaehyun, the masked Haho, casually remarked, that was almost too easy, but now, he needed to get back to Mawung to continue his main quest. Before he left, Jaehyun paused to consider how the victory's spoils would be shared. After all, he wasn't the first, nor the only one to arrive here. In total, there were 20 helmeted armored ogres. As rare monsters selling their drops could fetch a fortune, normally the player who lands the first hit gets to decide the loot distribution, but Jaehyun knew he had practically done everything himself. This made him wonder if it wouldn't be better to just wait for the other players to get wiped out first, and then make his move. Jaehyun remembers the R2 captain's words. Having been abandoned themselves, they wouldn't do the same to others. Those words resonated deeply, and even if he wouldn't admit it, he decided to help those in need. Now, however, he's starting to regret that decision. Lost in thought, Jaehyun hears the R2 captain thank Haho for his help, admitting that without him, no one would have survived. But then, the captain declares he won't let Haho just walk away. Jaehyun immediately assumes they're after the loot drops. What else matters in this game? But to his utter surprise, all they wanted was a photo with masked Haho, proof they'd raided alongside him. When the topic of battle loot comes up, the R2 captain asks if the Toon Guild needs any specific items. A Toon member quickly says yes, pointing out the items are worth a fortune. But the R2 leader interjects, arguing they wouldn't be so petty as to demand anything from the one who saved their lives. With that, the R2 leader convinces his ally that masked Heiho should take all the battle loot. Jaehyun is utterly stunned by their reaction, thinking, these guys are seriously not normal. Sometime later, Jaehyun continues his journey, but throughout his travels, the R2 guild's offer keeps replaying in his mind. Jaehyun realizes that even if they seemed like a bunch of idiots, playing alongside them might actually be fun, but he knows he can't. If he did, he'd never achieve his goals. After all, his mission is to stand against Warlord's 30 strongest guilds, and Jaehyun refuses to drag anyone else into that fight. So, he's content to fight alongside his skeletons, eager to complete the main quest. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a massive bear falls. Syl, leading her team, lands the killing blow, showcasing her incredible skill to her allies. The princess approaches Syl, beaming. "You were incredible, as always," she praises. But unlike the princess, the mage shatters the celebratory mood. The Triple Wing Guild and the Big Smile Guild are at war, he reveals. These are two of the top 3 guilds, and the conflict ignited when a Big Smile official clashed with a Triple Wing member during a raid. Since then, both guilds have poured immense resources into the fight, but Big Smile is clearly losing. Syl thinks it's foolish to start a war during a crucial main quest period. Still, she secretly hopes at least one of those guilds collapses after the conflict, one less rival to worry about. The wizard, however, has more to say. Heiho Mask defeated an armored ogre and is now ahead in the main quest. To everyone's surprise, Syl isn't furious. Instead, she's pleased with the news. She simply says they need to speed things up so they don't fall behind. So, Syl orders her allies to accept Mawung's next quest, determined to ensure her guild reaches the second chapter of the main quest. Sometime later, at Bangsu Castle, Ahimbri comments that it's been a while since he last saw his apprentice. Jaehyun, meanwhile, wonders what this NPC is doing here. The wizard Ahimbri says he has something to deliver to his apprentice. He reveals the order's secret ring, declaring Jaehyun worthy of the item. However, Jaehyun isn't happy. In fact, he thinks things were going perfectly until the wizard showed up. Earlier that same day, Jaehyun received an invitation to join the secret order. Mawung invited him, but warned him to think carefully, as a member of the secret order must be willing to sacrifice his life for the organization. Jaehyun claimed he wasn't afraid to risk his life fighting evil, but deep down, all he could think about were the benefits the invitation would bring. Regardless, Mawung agreed to recruit him, sparking Jaehyun's hopes of finally receiving the order's ring. But then Mawung told Jaehyun to go find his mentor, and that news chilled him to the bone. Hunter Mawung revealed that Ahimbri was also part of the order, so Jaehyun would have to get his emblem from him. However, Jaehyun wasn't thrilled by this news. He knew Wizard Ahimbri wouldn't just hand over what he wanted on a silver platter. Back in the present, Wizard Ahimbri forces Jaehyun to beg for the item, and he's genuinely surprised by the protagonist's reaction. Jaehyun sighs. It's always like this. Still, he does what the wizard wants, practically groveling to be accepted into the order. Wizard Ahimbri struggles to hold back a laugh at the sight, but finally agrees to accept Jaehyun into the order. However, he declares that Jaehyun must complete a mission that will make him stronger, and with that, he sends him straight to the war zone. Jaehyun is utterly stunned by what he hears. A short while later, the protagonist arrives at the scene. He's met with a full-blown war zone. Jaehyun knows this place is infamous for an endless tide of monsters pouring in from beyond the castle walls. These relentless waves make the raid far more perilous than usual. But here's the kicker. Players are handsomely rewarded for every enemy they defeat, meaning massive cash payouts. Plus, it's a prime spot for leveling up. Jaehyun recalls how he yearned to reach this very place in his past life, but his guild members refused to follow, leaving him unable to experience it. Now, free from any constraints, he's itching to tackle this raid for the first time. But first, preparation is key. Meanwhile, a female player who's been tracking the Heiho Mask watches his every move. A satisfied smirk crosses her face. She's finally found him. Elsewhere, a brutal punishment is underway for some players. A massive tiger is unleashed upon them. While some beg for mercy, their leader Apollo, head of the guild bearing his name, only grows more enraged. His subordinates failed their mission, to track down the player who attacked them. Apollo seethes with fury over his men's failure, demanding to know why they couldn't get the job done. One subordinate explains that the Thunder Hunters interfered, making it impossible to fight against such powerful players. He adds that the Thunder Hunters are reportedly trying to recruit this rookie into their guild. Apollo scoffs, claiming this rookie is probably just acting arrogant because he's backed by one of the top 30 guilds. But Apollo has a plan. He contacts Heavy Bean, an officer from the Smile Guild. Apollo explains he needs a favor. He wants to teach the player known as Heiho Mask a harsh lesson. Heavy Bean asks what Apollo's beef is with this rookie. Apollo fumes, explaining that the Heiho Mask attacked his men and didn't even bother to apologize. In short, Apollo felt utterly humiliated by the act and now demands revenge. Heavy Bean, however, finds the reason utterly petty. He flatly refuses, stating his guild has no business getting involved in such a trivial matter. With no other choice, Apollo declares he's cutting off the Smile Guild's sponsorship, effective immediately. He claims it was his sponsorship that propelled the Smile Guild into the top 30. But since he can't count on their support when it matters, there's no reason to keep funding an ungrateful guild. Furious, Heavy Bean realizes he'll have to give in, even if he doesn't want to. He tells Apollo he'll help teach Heiho Mask a lesson. He also promises to report back once it's done. But the moment Heavy Bean hangs up, he spirals into a panic. Heavy Bean thinks refusing the request would cripple his guild's funds, but attacking Heiho Mask would shatter his reputation. Both options are terrible. Amidst his despair, someone appears, asking what's wrong. It's Cho Woo-rung, a reserve affiliate of the Smile Guild, asking if her superior needs a volunteer to take down Heiho Mask. Heavy Bean realizes this girl isn't an official guild member, so she might be useful in this tricky situation. He asks if she can do it. Cho replies that she owes Heavy Bean her life, and to repay him properly, she will eliminate Heiho Mask. Speaking of Heiho Mask, our protagonist is about to enter the new area. One of the guards announces that all participants must report to the castle gate. Immediately, numerous players prepare to enter. Then, an NPC steps forward. It's Bagel, the administrative captain of Turb Castle Wall, who tells all players about to enter to be prepared. Jaehyun is surprised to find this place even has a main NPC. Bagel explains that beyond the walls lies a true war zone, and the castle gate will only reopen after 144 hours. The reward will be based on the number of monsters each player eliminates, and they can only return when the gate reopens. So, they must keep that in mind. Furthermore, the NPC reveals a special quest for them. The quest? Defeat the Blue Giant, a mutant appearing in the war zone with a unique skill book as the reward. Jaehyun's eyes practically gleam at this revelation. A book like that guarantees a unique skill. This is something Jaehyun only ever heard about in his past life, but now he has a chance to obtain such an item. However, looking at the other players, Jaehyun realizes he's not the only one eyeing the special reward. Basically, everyone present covets this book, and they know that to get it, they might even have to eliminate other players. However, they all realize that the strongest among them is Heiho Mask. This makes it clear, the biggest challenge won't be defeating the Blue Giant, but getting to it before Heiho Mask does. Regardless, the gate swings open, and immediately, Jaehyun blasts off at top speed, determined to be first. With that, Jaehyun leaves the other players in despair. But amidst the chaos, Cho Woo-rung steps forward with an idea. One player scoffs, saying Cho is just a rookie, so there's no reason to listen to her. Not only that, but he also tells Cho not to get in everyone else's way. In response, Cho Woo-rung demonstrates her superiority by effortlessly taking down the insolent player. Cho tells the others not to get so worked up. She also states that she doesn't care about the book. Her only goal is to eliminate Heiho Mask. Cho claims she'll give the book to whoever helps her. That way, everyone wins. She believes it's a good deal for everyone. Not far off, Jaehyun spots everything. He realizes some players have formed an alliance to take him down. While he didn't think he'd lose to this group, Jaehyun didn't want any unnecessary trouble while he was here. But he had no choice but to deal with the situation. Meanwhile, Cho believed she had gathered enough players for her group, doubting Heiho could defeat so many. She was certain her victory was guaranteed. Not only that, but Cho imagined that by winning, her mentor would finally recognize her talents and grant her an official spot in the Big Grin Guild. Once she got in, Cho pictured having her own subordinates. She'd make them fulfill her every whim. She'd be a true boss. And with that, Cho could have anything she desired. Suddenly, one of her allies called out to Cho. Cho had been so lost in her thoughts that she hadn't seen the monsters approaching. Snapping back to reality, Cho ordered the others to take an attack formation. However, an ally pointed out that there were more monsters than usual surrounding them. Cho realized this was true. They couldn't hold this formation for long. Amidst the chaos, Cho spotted Heiho, the masked one. Jaehyun decided to tackle his problem creatively. He drew the monsters' attention to himself, then unleashed them straight onto his enemies. Seeing this, Cho was stunned. Heiho's unexpected strategy had caught her completely off guard. The other players were attacked, and some fell into despair as they watched their comrades drop. The players told Cho they wouldn't last much longer. They thought it best to retreat rather than try to face so many monsters. Cho, in turn, realized her plan was ruined. She had planned to ambush Heiho during the raid, but she was the one who had fallen into a trap. Still, Cho stood firm, declaring that once the lure faded, the monsters would calm down. She also told the others to hold out as long as they could, and in the meantime, she herself would deal with Ha-Ho, the masked one. Cho figured the small fry would serve as a distraction while she handled the bigger problem. With that, Cho charged straight at Jae-hyun, attacking him immediately and forcing the protagonist away from his team. As she got closer, Cho challenged Ha-Ho to a duel, but Jae-hyun said he wouldn't accept so easily. He knew he was facing the leader of the group hunting him, so he asked Cho if she knew who she was dealing with. Jae-hyun, for his part, claimed he didn't know Cho from anywhere. He found it strange that someone he'd never met was trying to eliminate him. Cho knew she couldn't reveal her connection to the Big Grin Guild, so she claimed she only wanted to eliminate Jae-hyun for his skill book. However, the protagonist wasn't convinced by her words. As he attacked, Jae-hyun called Cho a liar. He stated that it was clear from her face that she didn't care about the book at all. Cho neither confirmed nor denied it. Instead, she simply fought her opponent, trying not to fall for his provocations. Jae-hyun, on the other hand, realizes Cho's moves aren't bad at all, meaning he might have to unleash his necromancer skills. He hurls a bone bomb, but as it explodes, Cho deftly dodges it. Jae-hyun states that someone so skilled couldn't possibly be unknown, then asks Cho which guild she belongs to. Cho refuses to reveal anything, declaring she'll satisfy Ha-Ho's curiosity in a different way. Next, Cho pulls out battle gear from her inventory. Jae-hyun notices his opponent is donning her armor, a clear sign she's taking this fight seriously. He realizes that even if he eliminates Cho, he won't learn anything about her. Yet, he knows he can't afford to play around with an opponent like her. In this situation, Jae-hyun has no choice but to fight for real. Cho declares, "I won't go easy on you, Jae-hyun." But then, Cho spots several skeletons watching them. Jae-hyun tells her not to worry, explaining he ordered his allies not to interfere in this fight. Cho asks, "Why did you do that?" The protagonist replies that Cho challenged him to a duel. Therefore, it wouldn't be a fair duel if he accepted help from an ally. Hearing this, Cho thinks she once believed Ha-Ho was just a superficial guy, but now she's starting to see a naive side to him, and Cho believes this is a weakness to exploit. With that, Cho attacks Jae-hyun with fierce intensity. However, Jae-hyun states he felt no difference between this attack and the previous ones. Yet Cho moves incredibly fast, managing to get behind Jae-hyun and catch him off guard. Jae-hyun never expected that, but Cho thinks she's just getting started. Cho unleashes more attacks, and Jae-hyun takes heavy damage from the blows. Seeing Jae-hyun fall, Cho says, "In a way, I find him cute, but now, I'll finish off the one who dared to defy Heavy Bean." However, things don't go as Cho planned, as Jae-hyun receives outside help. One of Jae-hyun's skeletons intervenes in the duel, sweeping Cho off her feet. Surprised, Cho can't understand how this happened. Jae-hyun, in turn, reveals, "Cho, you're from the Big Grin Guild." After finally extracting the information he wanted, Cho is no longer useful. A while later, Jae-hyun ties Cho to a tree trunk and asks why the Big Grin Guild is after him. Cho declares, "Ha-Ho, you won't get any information from me." However, Jae-hyun states that Cho must be Cho Woo-rung, Heavy Bean's subordinate from the Big Grin Guild. But Cho pretends not to know what Jae-hyun is talking about. Jae-hyun says he knows everything, and Cho asks, "How?" Jae-hyun thinks that in his past life, Cho was Heavy Bean's most famous subordinate, but he doesn't intend to tell her that. He tells her, "You're not in a position to ask questions. Instead, you need to tell me why your guild is after me." Cho claims she doesn't know, then demands Ha-Ho eliminate her at once. Jae-hyun retorts that he won't do that, as it would be a waste to eliminate someone like Cho, plus she'd just respawn in 2 days anyway. Now that he's dealt with this problem, Jae-hyun knows he needs to find the blue giant. But before leaving completely, Jae-hyun warns Cho not to interfere in his affairs again. "Otherwise, I won't go as easy on you as I did this time." At this, Cho realizes Ha-Ho was a step ahead of her from the start, as Jae-hyun used the exact strategy Cho had planned, luring monsters and setting an ambush. A mix of fear and admiration grips Cho as she wonders who this guy truly is. Cho then says Ha-Ho is bold for trying to flirt with her, and she feels strange because that's never happened before. Sometime later, Cho reported to his boss that he failed to eliminate Heiho, the masked one. Heavy Bean told Cho he did what he could, but now he needed to rest. After hanging up and hearing Cho's excuses, Heavy Bean was gripped by despair. The person he trusted most had failed to eliminate Heiho. But looking on the bright side, Heavy Bean figured Apollo didn't know yet, so he could try another mission. However, just then, Heavy Bean received a call from Apollo. Apollo declared that the news of one of the top 30 guilds being defeated by a rookie player was simply unacceptable. Otherwise, it would utterly shatter the guild's reputation. This was the last thing Heavy Bean wanted to hear, and now, genuine rage began to simmer within him for Ha-Ho. Speaking of Haho, the protagonist felt an unsettling prickle, as if someone was bad-mouthing him, and he couldn't understand why. After defeating Cho, Jaehyun learned a lot about her. Though he wanted to ask more, Jaehyun was running out of time. His main objective was to be the first to reach the Blue Giant. With that, Jaehyun and his team set off on their adventure. Sometime later, Jaehyun found himself utterly exhausted. He claimed he barely managed to defeat the giant. Recovering after the brutal battle, Jaehyun admitted he hadn't expected it to take so long, but the enemy proved stronger than anticipated. Regardless, he thanked the other players for fighting amongst themselves and leaving the monster all to him, but Jaehyun was still annoyed that Cho tried to scheme against him. Thanks to that, he discovered the Big Smile Guild was after him. However, Jaehyun still didn't know the reason why. In his past life, due to the sudden rise of his personal guild, the top 30 guilds felt threatened and launched a joint attempt to eliminate them. Leading the charge was none other than Chai Seolyan, alongside the Thunder Hunters Guild. Because of this, Jaehyun wondered if Chai Seolyan was doing the same thing now. Jaehyun knew something was wrong, but he was furious that he still lacked the details. Regardless, Jaehyun believed the right thing to do was eliminate anyone who stood in his way. He noted there were still 138 hours left in the raid, so Jaehyun was eager to go make some serious money. Once the raid period ended, the gates finally swung open. Players returned to the starting point, most of them frustrated by their poor results. To make matters worse, those who had faced Jaehyun were deeply regretting ever crossing paths with Haho, the masked one, and some blamed themselves for listening to that girl from before. Amidst the chaos, Jaehyun declared they didn't need to play around anymore. After all, the day was too good to be ruined by pointless squabbles. However, Jaehyun was the only one truly happy after this raid. And to further provoke the losers, Jaehyun asked if they really came back without a single penny in their pockets. Naturally, the others were far from pleased, but Jaehyun couldn't care less, stating, "That's what you call karma." From afar, Cho watches him. She declares their next encounter won't be the same, because now, Cho is smitten with Jaehyun and has no desire to kill him anymore. Yet even Cho can't explain why. Immediately after, Bagel announces he'll reveal the mission's top contributor. He instructs the necromancer Herkin to report to his office. Jaehyun, in turn, is ecstatic. Inside Bagel's office, Bagel acknowledges Jaehyun as the one who defeated the most monsters, even taking down the Blue Giant. He insists on thanking him properly. Bagel also mentions a recent surge in strange monsters, complicating the local team's efforts. Bagel suspects the Ice Mountain is the source of these creatures. Not only that, but he plans to send an expedition to that mountain soon. Jaehyun, however, isn't listening. He already knows all this, and is there for one thing only. But the moment the reward is mentioned, Jaehyun's demeanor shifts entirely. Finally, the topic he's been waiting for has arrived. But before handing over the book, Bagel reveals he received a letter from Herkan's master. The master wants his apprentice in the Urgel Mountains. Jaehyun knows these mountains teem with high-level monsters, so his selection comes as no surprise. Still, the delay irritates Jaehyun. Noticing this, Bagel reveals the promised reward. Bagel remarks that he'd usually caution him to be careful with such a book, but he doesn't think it's necessary here. Excited, Jaehyun wonders what power the book will grant him. He activates the artifact, praying for something good. What he gets, however, is an ability called Clay Creation. Elsewhere, Syl seethes with anger. Hatch tries to calm her, telling her not to stress over something so trivial. But his words fall on deaf ears. Syl unleashes her fury on the surrounding landscape. Syl rages that some idiots appeared out of nowhere and stole the main quest monster, the one her guild was raiding. She demands to know who these guys are. Hatch replies they're not among the top 30 guilds, and since they evaded investigation, they're likely low-ranked. Syl orders the mage to place a bounty on their heads, ensuring no one else is around when the monster reappears. Even without knowing their identities, Syl knows they stole what was hers. She vows to eliminate everyone responsible. Meanwhile, another player questions if their actions weren't too ruthless. He admits stealing the monster from the Thunder Hunters was incredibly dangerous, a feat they barely pulled off. His ally counters that there was no other way. The Thunder Hunters were faster than they anticipated. The player suggests they simply eliminate all competitors next time, but his ally warns that would expose their identities, putting them at risk. The group's leader, in turn, reinforces this, declaring their goal is to rebalance the game through darkness itself. Finally, his name is revealed, Singlet, leader of the Workers' Guild. Richard, the player from before, states he'll follow the plan. Mikkel, their allied player, declares she'll also follow her guild's intentions. Weaver, one of the guild's affiliates, agrees. However, one of the members present, Momo, points out that Heiho Mask is completing the main quest faster than them, blaming Singlet for it. The leader retorts that their urgent goal is to stop the 30 largest guilds from winning, and he'll deal with Heiho Mask after that's resolved. Mikkel cuts in, saying they should stop the chatter and get straight to the next mission. Everyone agrees, and with that, they band together to proceed. Jaehyun discovers his clay creation skill lets him transform his golem into any other monster. Thrilled, Jaehyun immediately pictured himself soaring on a dragon's back, or perhaps even summoning titans for future battles. Both possibilities were simply too good to be true. With that, Jaehyun decides to put the skill to the test. He uses a blue giant's tooth, combining it with his clay creation skill. His golem begins to transform, and Jaehyun imagines something magnificent is about to unfold. But Jaehyun is utterly disappointed with his creation. Instead of a colossal beast, he's summoned a gnome. His system alerts him that's the maximum you can achieve at your current level. Infuriated, Jaehyun curses the game once more, realizing anything truly interesting is locked behind high levels. Sometime later, Jaehyun returns to Urgel village, kicking himself for setting his expectations too high. He remembers that even in his past life, achieving something like that was incredibly difficult, so why would it be easier now? Jaehyun figures he'll level up eventually, even if it's slow, but for now, he wants to focus on the main quest. He recalls meeting the blacksmith Wolf in his past life. The blacksmith is part of a secret order, and also the most renowned NPC blacksmith in the game. After all, Wolf is known for crafting epic items with extraordinary attributes. What's more, there's no way to meet him outside the main quest, which is why Jaehyun never encountered him in his past life. But now that he has this chance, Jaehyun hopes to get his hands on some interesting weapon. However, upon entering the blacksmith's shop, Jaehyun finds no sign of the owner, wondering why the blacksmith isn't there. In that very instant, Jaehyun is blindsided by a blow from the blacksmith, catching him completely off guard and sending him flying. Jaehyun wonders what just hit him. He knows this is an NPC area, so being attacked like this is far from normal. The blacksmith in turn asks, "Is that all you've got, adventurer?" Wolf scoffs that today's rookies are incredibly weak. Back in his day, it was the exact opposite. Jaehyun asks, "Are you Wolf the blacksmith?" Wolf confirms, "That's me." Jaehyun then demands, "Then why did you attack me?" Wolf replies, "It's a test for new recruits of the order." Annoyed, Jaehyun snaps, "What kind of test is that? But just by meeting." Wolf, his system rewards him. Suddenly, Jaehyun realizes he's definitely not dealing with a normal NPC. Wolf, meanwhile, remarks that besides being weak, the rookie is also impatient. However, Wolf notices the rookie's sudden change in behavior and doesn't understand why. Jaehyun latches onto the blacksmith, declaring, "I'll accept anything you have for me." Wolf finds this even stranger and tells Jaehyun, "Get off me." After kicking him out of his shop, Wolf tells Jaehyun to go to the Barain forest and deliver something. Even after getting beaten and kicked, Jaehyun feels no humiliation. He's ready to do whatever it takes to gain more benefits from the blacksmith. Jaehyun realizes he's received a new quest: deliver a package to those residing in the Barain forest. Jaehyun knows only elves live in that region, but elves are usually hostile towards humans. The elves hide deep within the forest, making them even harder to find. In his past life, maps led straight to the elves, but now Jaehyun is completely in the dark. In that case, Jaehyun will have to find another way to locate the elves. Nearby, a player nicknamed Pitbull Singh, one of the top 100 in the rankings, is recognized by others. They wonder what someone like him is doing there, until they consider the possibility that he might also be after Heiho Mask. In his past life, Jaehyun faced Pitbull. Even though his opponent was incredibly strong, Jaehyun managed to defeat him, albeit with difficulty. However, Jaehyun was at his peak then, and now he's unsure if he can defeat such an opponent. Furthermore, Pitbull earned his nickname from the cruel way he defeats his enemies. Therefore, some believe Heiho Mask wouldn't stand a chance against him. However, Jaehyun hears everything and is enraged. He declares he doesn't like hearing such nonsense and refuses to be called inferior to anyone. Amidst this, someone approaches and says they heard Haho is buying information about the Barain forest. Pitbull stares at Jaehyun and says he'll give him everything he knows about the forest. Jaehyun is surprised, as he had no idea Pitbull knew anything about Barain, so Jaehyun asks what Pitbull wants in return. To everyone's surprise, instead of threatening him, Pitbull says he just wants to confess his love. Jaehyun is utterly shocked. Not just Jaehyun, but everyone else can't believe what they just heard. After all, no one would ever imagine Pitbull Singh confessing his love to anyone. A while later, the protagonist is at a loss for what to do after what happened. He can't calm down and blames Pitbull, claiming that after what Pitbull did in public, the entire city erupted into chaos. Because of the massive crowd, they had to flee into the forest, but now they're separated. Jaehyun states he doesn't like men, so he'll have to reject the confession. However, Pitbull says there's been a misunderstanding. He wasn't trying to confess to Heiho. Pitbull Pitbull explains that a few months ago, he was hunting around the forest when he spotted a strange rabbit. Soon after, the rabbit's owner appeared, searching for her pet. That's when Pitbull saw her for the first time, and she was the most beautiful woman in the world. But as soon as the woman saw him, she ran off with her rabbit, leaving Pitbull behind. Since then, they've never met again. Pitbull waited endlessly, but the woman never reappeared. Driven by his quest, he scoured local NPCs for any scrap of information about the elves. Every potential lead turned into a dead end. On the verge of despair, a whisper reached him, another seeker of elf lore. With a shared objective, Pitbull joined forces with Ha-Ho. Jae-hyun seethed. Pitbull could have just said that, instead of rambling about confessing his love. Regardless, Jae-hyun felt utterly drained by the whole ordeal. Yet, he knew this mission had to end, and for now, Pitbull was his only hope of finding the elves. With a sigh, Jae-hyun asked Pitbull to lead him to the spot where his beloved had first appeared. Their journey led them to a majestic waterfall. Pitbull explained that, based on his intel, Bekong Waterfall was a prime location for elf sightings. Other frequent spots included the ancient oak tree or the outskirts of the nearest village. Jae-hyun's gaze sharpened. "Are there monsters here too?" he asked. Pitbull nodded grimly. "Yes, and they're massive. You'll need to be extremely cautious." Jae-hyun declared his usual strategy. "Time to hunt some monsters and see what shakes loose." Suddenly, a colossal serpent emerged. Pitbull instantly moved to engage it, but Jae-hyun stopped him. "I'll handle this serpent myself," Pitbull warned him. "Its level is incredibly high. Even for me, this would be a tough fight." The protagonist merely smirked. "I know, but I am Ha-Ho, the masked one." Without a flicker of fear, Jae-hyun charged headlong into the monstrous foe. The serpent struck first, its massive blow sending the protagonist hurtling through the air. Pitbull cried out, "Jae-hyun, are you all right?" The protagonist slowly rose, dramatically clutching his side, tears welling up. "Oh, the pain! It's unbearable! I'm dying!" Utterly bewildered, Pitbull stared. "Ha-Ho, what are you doing?" As Jae-hyun remained vulnerable, the serpent coiled for another strike. Pitbull yelled, "Dodge! Jae-hyun, you'll die!" Yet Jae-hyun stood his ground. Then a swift arrow pierced the air, striking the serpent dead center. More arrows followed, and Pitbull's eyes widened as he finally understood. Jae-hyun explained, "NPCs, or residents, don't fight monsters. They flee in terror. So when these residents are hunted, the elves appear to protect them." Pitbull finally grasped it. Ha-Ho had been acting all along, but the protagonist shrugged. "There was always a chance I'd be wrong." His gamble paid off. Jae-hyun's prediction had come true. He then addressed the elves, introducing himself as Hurkan, sent by the blacksmith wolf. Jae-hyun added that he carried an important delivery and inquired if they would invite him to their village. But one of the elfas snapped. "You tricked us!" Her companion chimed in. "This is precisely why elves never trust humans. You are disgusting, greedy creatures." They scoffed, refusing to believe Lord Wolf would entrust such a vital task to a scoundrel like him. Jae-hyun knew force was out of the question. It would ruin the mission, but how else could he possibly proceed? Suddenly, Pitbull dropped to his knees before the alphas. He pleaded, "I apologize for our deception, but I had no other choice. I needed to meet your leader." Pitbull confessed that he'd seen her in the forest some time ago and had fallen instantly in love. Now, with their paths crossing once more, Pitbull begged for a chance to truly get to know her. Jae-hyun was gripped by despair. Elves already hated humans, and this approach wouldn't improve their situation one bit. But to his surprise, the elf declared she couldn't blame anyone for falling for her, knowing full well her own beauty. Her name was Celine, and she quickly invited Pitbull to visit her village. With that, the protagonist completed his mission to find the elves, but he was stunned by how unpredictable this game could truly be. As they walked, Jae-hyun asked how things had spiraled into this. Pitbull simply replied that he could die happy right now. Annoyed, Jae-hyun snapped that they'd almost died to the elves, yet just because his confession was accepted, Pitbull was practically melting over some cute, crazy girl. Jae-hyun warned him, speaking from personal experience, that he knew a woman as beautiful as she was unhinged, and advised Pitbull not to judge by appearances. However, Pitbull confessed that he didn't like elves just for their looks. For him, elves were symbols of fantasy, but not the kind of fantasy Ha-Ho was imagining. Pitbull explained that when he was younger, in every game and comic he read and played, elves were the perfect symbol of the fantasy genre. Adventuring through magical worlds alongside them had always been his dream. That's why Pitbull loved elves so much. Jae-hyun, however, wondered what any of that had to do with the confession. Pitbull then asked if Ha-Ho wasn't in the game to fulfill his own dreams. Jaehyun scoffed, saying his dreams weren't that idiotic. He revealed his true desire, to become the strongest player and warlord and crush anyone who dared to cross him. Just imagining that day arriving filled him with satisfaction. Pitbull, though, questioned if that didn't make Haeho just like those who crossed him. Jaehyun retorted that he didn't care, because in this world, the strong devoured the weak. He refused to be the prey. He would be the hunter. Pitbull pointed out that by that rule, if the same happened to Haeho, it would simply be the natural order of things. Regardless, Pitbull couldn't grasp how anyone could find joy in trampling over others. Enraged, Jaehyun punched Pitbull, declaring that Pitbull knew nothing about his life. Dreams or happiness, Jaehyun spat, are luxuries only those who already have something can afford. Unlike those people, Jaehyun was someone who had to fight day after day just to survive. Not only that, but he knew firsthand what it was like to lose the little he had in a matter of seconds. Jaehyun stated he understood what Pitbull was trying to do, but he didn't need a lecture from anyone. Amidst the chaos, one of the elves stepped in to break up the fight. "We finally arrived," she announced. The elf then presented her home, Baheim Village. Celine pointed out that the elder was in the largest tree, and without wasting a moment, Jaehyun headed straight for it. With him gone, Celine turned to Pitbull, asking why he and his companion had been fighting. Pitbull didn't answer immediately. Anyway, Jaehyun is led to the elven elder. Celine explains that Jaehyun is here on Lord Wolf's command. Jaehyun realizes he almost lost his cool and messed everything up for a moment. But now, he needs to focus on completing his mission. Soon after, the elven elder appears. His name is Dra, and he immediately suspects Jaehyun is involved with the secret order. Jaehyun confirms it, handing the blacksmith's package to the elder. Dara pulls out the package's contents, and instantly Jaehyun recognizes it, an epic item that removes all negative effects and status penalties, the Bracelet of Purification. Now he understands why Wolf didn't let him see the package before the delivery was complete. However, Jaehyun just realized something crucial. He knows his next mission is to purify the corrupted elf and uncover who's behind the second main quest. He figured he'd earn the artifact as a reward, but instead, Dra tells him he can leave. Jaehyun asks, "Is that all you have to say?" Dra confirms, "There's nothing more for you." Adding insult to injury, Dra calls him weak. At that, Jaehyun realizes, just like before, his level is too low to proceed with the main quest. So he declares, "I'll return when I'm stronger." Far from the elven village, Jaehyun battles monsters, seething with rage that nothing is going his way. To make matters worse, the Thunder Hunters currently hold the most progress on the main quest. They recently defeated the ogre, so they must be in the Urgel Mountains. Jaehyun isn't satisfied with his own results. He believes he should be level 100 by now. Instead, he's weak and losing opportunities because of it. But that's not the true source of his fury. Pitbull's words gnaw at him. Jaehyun refuses to accept that what happened in his past life was natural or simply fate. To vent his rage, he unleashes it all on the monsters before him. To amp up the tension, Jaehyun casts aside his sword and faces the monsters barehanded. He declares he's sick of all this nonsense, and maybe it's time to put an end to it. Meanwhile, Pitbull recounts everything that happened earlier to Celine, admitting he overreacted and meddled in someone else's life. Celine then asks why he doesn't apologize to Jaehyun. She tells him it might seem hard, but he should try. After all, being honest with each other is what friends do. Jaehyun is about to be attacked by an enemy, but just then, Pitbull appears, intervening on his behalf. Pitbull says, "I'm here to apologize," and apparently, he arrived just in time. After defeating the monster, Pitbull confesses something is bothering him. Jaehyun retorts, "If you're looking for a fight, you'd better do it now because I'm not in the mood." However, Pitbull looks Jaehyun in the eye and apologizes for what he said earlier. With that, Jaehyun shuts down the argument. Pitbull insists he was just worried and didn't mean to meddle or lecture him about life. Jaehyun is completely blindsided by the offer. He tells Pitbull that if he's feeling guilty, he can help him hunt or something. Regardless, Pitbull asks if his apology is accepted. Jaehyun simply states they'll hunt until they drop, so Pitbull can't back out. Confused, Pitbull asks, "Do apologies come with a price?" Jaehyun clarifies that's not what he meant. It was just his way of accepting the apology. But amidst their conversation, they're attacked by another monster. This time, they strike together, swiftly defeating the beast. They then clear out all the smaller monsters surrounding them. Each victory showers them both with experience points and level ups. After an intense hunting spree, Jaehyun finally hits level 100. He declares he hasn't slept for 3 days just to reach this milestone, and now he's utterly exhausted. Pitbull, equally drained, suggests it's time to log off for a bit. Jaehyun Mew says that with his current level, he can tackle the main quest without a hitch. He realizes it would have taken him far longer to reach this level without Pitbull's help. Before Pitbull logs off, Jaehyun, a little shyly, thanks him for the assistance. Pitbull tells him, "Don't be so shy, man. We're both guys. It's embarrassing to see you so flustered." With that, Pitbull logs out, leaving Jaehyun behind. Jaehyun isn't thrilled with their farewell, but there's nothing he can do about it now. Instead of logging off, Jaehyun heads back to the elf's house. Dara declares Jaehyun is strong enough to find the child and entrusts him with the bracelet. However, Jaehyun isn't even listening, his mind fixed on getting the item. He finally receives the elf's bracelet, celebrating his reward for all his hard work. Jaehyun tells the elf to trust him with the mission, secretly thinking he'll keep the item for the rest of his journey once it's done. But to his shock, the elf admits he doesn't know where to send Jaehyun. Dra explains that if he knew the location, he would have gone himself. Jaehyun's first task is to find the location of the next quest before he can even complete it. Jaehyun, however, begs for at least one hint before leaving, but it's useless. The elf has nothing. After leaving the forest, Jaehyun wonders how he's supposed to find a corrupted elf on such a massive map. He thought reaching a high level would solve his problems, but new challenges keep popping up. Now he has no choice but to try trading information again. But he can't just go around asking questions like he did before. If he reveals what he knows, everyone will go wild trying to hunt him down. Yet there's one thing others don't know. Though it's just a theory, Jaehyun believes the corrupted elf's true purpose is to raise an army of monsters. This means many monsters will spawn near the corrupted elf's location, so Jaehyun can buy information about newly spawned monsters. People will provide it, completely unaware of the true implications. Once he gathers all the pieces, Jaehyun figures it'll be much easier to pinpoint the corrupted elf's whereabouts. He celebrates, finally finding a starting point. Just then, someone appears, asking if Jaehyun is looking for monster information. Jaehyun immediately thinks this isn't as good as it seems, because he's just run into Shev, the Slayer. Earlier, at the Red Buffalo's base, Yell mentioned they once received an anonymous tip about the corrupted elf's location, and the same source just sent a new message. Yell said the source was offering money for info on recently spawned monsters, but he couldn't figure out why. Shev explained it was likely a smokescreen, where the person with crucial info about the corrupted elf was intentionally feeding them useless data. The reason? Monsters weren't their real interest. Something else was. Yell agreed it made sense and suggested they keep this info under wraps. Shev nodded. He vowed to hunt down the source and bring back the one who lays the golden eggs. Jaehyun was stunned by what he saw. He'd hoped to lure a small guild player with his bait, but instead, he'd snagged Shev the Slayer himself. Jaehyun decided to scrap his plan and make a quick exit, but Shev snarled, "Don't even think about running from me, ha-ho." Jaehyun knew he had to act fast. He commanded his skeletons to surround Shev. Shev remarked, "Smart move, not attacking directly, just threatening." Jaehyun knew Shev was right. He couldn't defeat him even if he tried. Shev then added, "Ha-ho, you're far more skilled than any rookie I know. Plus, I know you're sitting on some crucial information." Then Shev demanded, "So who are you, Ha-ho, really?" Jaehyun didn't answer, leaving Shev slightly puzzled. Suddenly, Jaehyun started shouting, claiming he was just a helpless rookie. "And now some crazy red buffalo is threatening me." He insisted all he wanted was info on monsters for his videos, not a fight with stronger players. Shev stared at Ha-ho, clearly unconvinced by the act. Jaehyun pleaded with Shev to leave him alone and not hurt him. Shev then said, "Apparently there's been a misunderstanding. After all, Ha-ho, you don't seem to fit the profile of the person who fed information to my guild." Jaehyun inwardly cheered, believing his plan had worked. Shev continued, "The person we're looking for is about to get a 5 billion bonus. Plus, the guild is ready to offer a full salary with tons of benefits. But since you're not that person, we'll just have to keep searching until we find them." Hearing this, Jaehyun said it had always been his dream to join the Red Buffaloes. But 5 billion is a huge sum, even for you guys. He added that Shev's actions didn't match his words, and he shouldn't try to buy everyone he met. But in his thoughts, Jaehyun mused, "With that kind of cash, I could feast like a king." Shev then asked, "So, Ha-ho, what do you think about joining my guild?" He added that if Ha-ho was interested, he could offer the same contract. Jaehyun said the offer came out of nowhere, and he didn't understand why. However, Shev told Ha-ho to think carefully before answering. "Because if I don't have you as an ally, Ha-ho, I'll consider you a rival, and I'll have to eliminate you right here, right now." But Jaehyun declared it wasn't time to accept yet. He claimed he didn't want to rely on anyone else's strength to grow powerful. His desire was to achieve his goals through his own merit, even if it meant dying along the way. Then, Jaehyun added, "But when I'm strong enough, the Red Buffaloes will be the first to crumble beneath my might." Chev stepped back, remarking, "The view from this peak truly is beautiful." He pointed out Red Lake from there. My guild confirmed an exponential surge of monsters near the lake. Jaehyun asked why Chev was telling this to a rival. Chev scoffed. "I don't recognize a mere brat as my rival. Besides, my guild is strong enough not to bow to anyone, much less some arrogant nobody." Chev said he was only sharing the info because he admired Haho's playstyle, but warned him not to jump to conclusions. With that said, Chev announced he was leaving. But before he could go, Jaehyun told Chev to pay attention to the Salt Mountain. Jaehyun argued that if they were staying away from elf territories, it meant the Red Buffaloes were advancing through the main quest's dwarf path. Therefore, the closest location had to be the Salt Mountain. But Jaehyun told Chev not to get too worked up about it. Meanwhile, Jaehyun thought to himself that he wouldn't be called a brat, not when he'd been in this game longer than anyone. Hearing this, Chev burst out laughing. He declared that Haho was constantly being made a fool of. Jaehyun bristled, but simply decided to leave. Chev announced his recruitment had failed. Apparently, his target would rather die than join his guild. Chev even considered pushing the offer. However, Chev was curious to see how far Haho would get on his own. For Chev, it was fine to take one step back to take two forward later. The same, however, couldn't be said for Yell. When he returned to base, Chev's ears were ringing from what he heard. Jaehyun believed no one was smarter than him. He only wished the same could be said for his skeleton allies. Annoyed, Jaehyun snapped at the skeletons to stop messing around in the lake. In the past, the same thing happened with his old guildmates. While Jaehyun focused on slaying monsters, his companions just played in the lake, mesmerized by the water's unusual color. Because of it, Jaehyun was branded a game addict. Jaehyun found this place far too familiar. Regardless, Jaehyun ordered his skeletons into formation. He'd already sensed they weren't alone. Jaehyun noticed a warrior, two mages, and a priest approaching, likely setting up an ambush. With that, Jaehyun told his skeletons to prepare, and on his signal, everyone was to attack. Jaehyun waited for the perfect moment, but defying all his expectations, the players didn't attack as they drew closer. Instead, they approached Haho and on their knees begged for his help. The players sought Haho's help to hunt the corrupted gray rooster. Jaehyun, the protagonist, questioned why they couldn't hunt it themselves. They claimed to be from the 2nd division of the Golden Brothers Guild. Jaehyun knew this group barely cracked the top 30 guilds, and being from the 2nd division made them even less significant. Jaehyun demanded they summarize their request. One of the players revealed that if they failed this task, they'd be kicked out of the guild. Jaehyun stated he couldn't help, which left them desperate. They pleaded for help, promising to give him everything they had, even money if necessary. So, Jaehyun asked how much they had. The group leader stated they had 20,000 in total, but Jaehyun found it paltry. They claimed they could forgo the monster's reward if needed, but they needed help, no matter what. Jaehyun mused that he'd have to defeat the corrupted monsters anyway, so perhaps helping them wouldn't be a waste. He proposed the deal include the 20,000 and the hunt's reward. The players accepted, profusely thanking him for his help. However, something was off about these guys, and Jaehyun hadn't realized it yet. A flashback revealed that before this encounter, they had been toiling in a mine to pay off a debt. For a long time, they had been slaves to the Apollo Guild. Those who failed to pay their debts to the Apollo Guild ended up in these mines, and they were no exception. Apollo promised them another chance after they failed to pay their debts. However, the task was to eliminate Haho, the mask, and only then would their debt be settled. But they claimed they couldn't handle such a difficult mission. Apollo assured them he'd lend high-quality equipment and didn't care about the method as long as Haho was eliminated. Only then would he consider the task complete. Otherwise, they'd spend eternity in the mines. Back in the present, the players planned to distract Haho with the monster, then seize the opportunity to ambush him. However, upon seeing the monster, they realized it wouldn't be as easy as they'd imagined. After all, the rooster was level 120, far above their own levels. Jaehyun declared, "I'll remove the monster's armor, then you guys handle the rest." He activated a muscle modification, and with his increased speed, he charged the enemy. They watched Haho attack in close combat without fear, but they knew the rooster was a ranged monster, which could complicate things. Jaehyun wasn't naive. He knew exactly what he was getting into. He swiftly dodged the enemy's attacks and commented, "This rooster is slower than I remember." Besides dodging, Jaehyun also attacked. With his perfected speed, the rooster couldn't escape his blows. Jaehyun held the advantage, and in a short time, he managed to strip the monster's armor. The other players were stunned. Meanwhile, Jaehyun said, "Only the helmet left. Then we can say goodbye to this enemy." At that instant, the group leader authorized the attack, and the party's mage launched a fireball. Jaehyun watched with a look of concern, but moments later, the fireball exploded. The leader ordered another ranged attack, and again an explosion erupted. He repeated the attack multiple times until he was certain the target was defeated. Seeing Ha-ho vanish amidst the blasts, they cheered, believing they would no longer be slaves. But their joy was short-lived, as Jaehyun spoke up, revealing he'd sensed something was off from the start. Jaehyun noticed that despite the player's story, they had good quality equipment. Plus, they made a necromancer fight on the front lines. From experience, Jaehyun was prepared for an ambush, and not only did he defeat the monster, but he also evaded the player's attacks. Now, Jaehyun stated he didn't care which guild they belonged to, because all of you will be punished accordingly for trying to trick me. Desperate, the players who tried to ambush Jaehyun attempted to convince him not to punish them. However, they realized even the rooster wanted revenge against them. Jaehyun declared, "You have nothing left to bargain with, just accept your end." But amidst the chaos, Jaehyun's system blared an alert. A corrupted elf had appeared nearby. The elf spotted Jaehyun on the battlefield, but vanished before he could pinpoint her. Immediately, his system warned him, less than 3 minutes to capture the target. Jaehyun didn't want to leave, but he ordered the other players to keep the rooster busy. His skeletons would watch over them until his return, but he warned them, "Try to escape, and it'll be worse for you." Jaehyun realized this was a golden opportunity. He knew it was only a matter of time until he captured the elf. Succeeding would buy him crucial time and secure his top spot in the main quest rankings. With less than a minute left, Jaehyun tried to close the distance, but something felt off. Even after unleashing every buff he had, he couldn't catch her. Desperate, Jaehyun resorted to throwing a volley of skeleton bombs in her direction. The bombs detonated near her, but the elf still managed to evade them. Jaehyun cursed. He should have known it wouldn't be this easy. Time was running out, but failure wasn't an option for him. Jaehyun launched one final attack. Again, the elf dodged his bomb, but Jaehyun smirked. "Don't celebrate too soon," he warned. "That skeleton bomb wasn't meant for you. It was to propel me forward." With that boost, Jaehyun finally closed in on the elf. But the moment he touched her, she coughed up blood, a spray of it splattering across Jaehyun's face, sending both of them crashing to the ground. Jaehyun stared, then asked, "Did you bite your own tongue?" With a wicked grin, she subtly confirmed it. Panic seized Jaehyun. The elf couldn't die yet. If she did, he'd fail a crucial quest. To prevent her death, Jaehyun quickly placed the ring of purification on her, praying it would cleanse her corruption. After a moment, the elf pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to Jaehyun. In a way, Jaehyun's plan had worked, but then the elf vanished for good. Even so, Jaehyun's system chimed. Quest complete. He hadn't expected this outcome, but at least the mission was done. But then, a question burned in his mind. What was the point of a timer if the quest ended like this? Furious, Jaehyun cursed the game for the 1,000th time. Back with the other players, they were struggling against the giant rooster. Suddenly, Jaehyun reappeared, and with his golem, utterly annihilated the monster. They cheered, "Ha-ho's back!" and thanked him for handling the monster. But their gratitude didn't stop him from dishing out a beating to everyone. They revealed the Apollo Guild sent them, leaving them no choice but to accept the mission to eliminate Heiho. This made Jaehyun realize Apollo was going to extreme lengths to take him down. Not to mention, Apollo had heavily armed its thugs with gear even a rich guild would struggle to acquire. This, combined with the player from the Grin Guild he encountered earlier, led Jaehyun to conclude both guilds had formed an alliance to eliminate him. With this revelation, Jaehyun couldn't just stand by. He then ordered the players to get up and hand over all their equipment. Not only that, but Jaehyun declared they now owed him 1,000,000 gold per week, making the players think Ha-ho was even worse than Apollo. Meanwhile, at the Grin Guild's headquarters, Heavy Bean was relaxing to classical music, thinking these quiet moments were the only pleasures in his life. Until, in the middle of it all, an ally burst in with an urgent message. Heavy Bean learned the Red Buffalo Guild had declared war on them. Heavy Bean demanded to know why. His subordinate explained they were blamed for attacking Heiho Mask. Bean hadn't known Heiho was associated with the Red Buffaloes, but he dismissed it as a misunderstanding and vowed to sort it out with the rival guild leader. However, his subordinate then revealed that the items they'd lent to the Apollo Guild had appeared on the used item market. Not only that, but the asking price for the items was above market value, making them difficult to recover. Utterly shocked, Heavy Bean asked, "Who's the seller?" his associate replied. "It's Heiho Mask." Naturally, Heavy Bean was furious and cursed Heiho with every name imaginable. Sometime later, in Baheim Forest, the elf asked Jaehyun to return the Ring of Purification, stating he didn't trust humans. As he left, Jaehyun thought the elf was petty for not just giving him the item outright. At least he managed to get the next quest. The quest involved searching for a marked location on the corrupted elf's map, but upon reading the letter, Jaehyun realized it was a riddle. He wondered why elves had to write so poetically instead of just getting straight to the point. Unable to decipher it, Jaehyun had no choice but to ask an elf expert for a favor. So Jaehyun met up with Pitbull. However, Jaehyun noticed Pitbull had charmed more than one elf since their last meeting. Green with envy, Jaehyun wished Pitbull nothing but the worst. Next, one of the elves fed Sing directly. Jealous, another elf claimed Aisha was truly Sing's favorite. Sing, however, denied it, insisting he liked all the elves equally. Fuming, Jaehyun tried to figure out what Pitbull was doing surrounded by so many elves. Pitbull defended himself, claiming it all happened naturally. He explained that to stay in the village as long as possible, he needed the elves to like him. So Pitbull was doing his best to please everyone. At that, Jaehyun realized it could only be a mission assigned to Pitbull. But seeing Jaehyun confront Sing, the elves tried to push him away. However, Sing calmed them, saying they didn't need to resort to violence. Sing declared that even if they tried, no one could harm him. Jaehyun, meanwhile, was outraged, risking his life while Pitbull flirted with elves. Anyway, Sing mentioned it had been a while since their last meeting and asked what Jaehyun wanted. Jaehyun handed over the document, requesting a translation, and Sing revealed the poem referred to the Blue Mist Forest. Jaehyun asked how Pitbull deciphered it so quickly. Sing explained the poem mentioned a place guarded by eagles where blue clouds covered the sky. Therefore, there was only one place with that description. With that, Sing told Jaehyun he should stop playing games and start reading some books. After getting what he wanted, Jaehyun unleashed his fury on a tree, far from the elves' forest. He muttered that elves were supposed to hate humans, not date them. His skeletons tried to comfort their master, claiming it was fine to be single. Jaehyun insisted he wasn't jealous, asserting that if he wanted, he could build a harem of beautiful women. Amidst this, a monster appeared nearby, a level 110 Smogrian. Immediately, the Smogrian lunged at Jaehyun. However, Jaehyun wasn't caught so easily, but Jaehyun wondered why everyone always underestimated him. After that, Jaehyun questioned if he was in the right place, as he'd only encountered Smogrians so far. Then, Jaehyun remembered Pitbull had warned him that the Sweepers Guild, one of the top 30, lived near that area. Jaehyun wasn't worried. He was well prepared, but he found it strange not to have met any humans yet, until suddenly, a man appeared and demanded to know who Jaehyun was associated with. Seeing this, Jaehyun figured he must be from the Sweepers Guild and stated he wasn't associated with anyone. At that, the enemy declared Jaehyun could only be an intruder. Instantly, Jaehyun realized the scenery had shifted. The enemy declared that intruders must be eliminated. His name was Avin, a corrupted companion. Jaehyun then understood this wasn't another player, but a monster tied to the main quest. Jaehyun launched his attack, only to find the enemy brimming with energy. Immediately, Jaehyun's attacks proved useless. So Jaehyun summoned his skeleton knights, but right off the bat, one was struck down. In moments, the enemy annihilated the rest of his skeletal allies. Enraged by the fate of his allies, Jaehyun unleashed his speed ability, slicing into the enemy. Afterward, Jaehyun scoffed. This monster isn't even that strong. However, Jaehyun learned the hard way that the enemy was far from defeated. Not only that, but Avin possessed regeneration abilities. Physical attacks were utterly useless against him. Jaehyun had never encountered such a monster, wondering what an overpowered foe like this was doing in the game. Next, Jaehyun commanded his skeleton mage, the last one standing, to launch a ranged attack. But before the mage could even cast its spell, it was obliterated by the monster. Jaehyun realized that not only were physical attacks ineffective, but Avin was also fast enough to dodge magical assaults. How could he possibly defeat such an enemy? Jaehyun mused that he'd never faced a monster like this, not even in his past life. He deemed the task incredibly difficult, leaving him no choice but to go all out. With that, Jaehyun summoned all his skeleton allies along with his golem. He also unleashed the Curse of Sloth and Spirit Corrosion on the enemy, hoping this combo would finally yield results. Even with everything thrown at him, the enemy struck, swiftly destroying the skeletons once more. Jaehyun was stunned, but had no time to process it as the enemy lunged at him next. Enraged, Jaehyun engaged in close-quarters combat. He knew his skeletons weren't enough. He'd have to resolve this situation without their help. It was a one-on-one battle now. Jaehyun believed a single blow would end this battle, not just for the enemy, but for him too. The enemy landed a powerful kick. Jaehyun was sent flying, barely avoiding a direct hit. But now, he was absolutely furious, channeling that rage against his foe. Jaehyun summoned his golem once more, using his ally to try and pin the monster, clearing his path for a decisive charge. However, the adversary breaks free and strikes Jaehyun. Jaehyun takes a severe hit, but this was all part of his plan. Once close enough, Jaehyun unleashes his skills, temporarily freezing the enemy in place. Jaehyun's skeleton mages manifest, readying a powerful attack spell. With the enemy now surrounded, Jaehyun commands his allies to strike. Moments later, a massive explosion engulfs the monster, nearly catching Jaehyun in its blast. His system alerts him that he's completed the mission Elf's Remembrance, but Jaehyun finds the enemy's stats incredibly exaggerated. To recover from the damage, Jaehyun chugs a healing potion, but then a shocking surprise unfolds. Fear grips Jaehyun as he sees his enemy standing once more. Not only that, but Jaehyun realizes he can't possibly continue fighting in his current state. If he pushes on, he's doomed to lose. However, instead of attacking Jaehyun, the monster strikes its own head, leaving Jaehyun utterly bewildered. Then, the adversary's mask shatters, and he pleads with Jaehyun to finish him off, before the corruption consumes him again. He reveals that, just like Jaehyun, he was once a member of the Secret Order, but during a mission, he was ensnared by the power of corruption. After enduring a long period of torment, his mind was twisted, and ever since, he became a monster, hunting human intruders in this area. His intention was to join the Order to help others, not to eliminate them. Now, he yearns for an end, unable to bear being a puppet of evil any longer. Jaehyun approaches the young man, telling him he was the strongest enemy he'd ever faced, proving that even without these transformations, he would have been a formidable opponent as a human. Jaehyun then declares that the true villains are those responsible for the corruption, and they are his real targets. He even suggests he might be able to use a purification circle to heal him. In turn, the young man thanks Jaehyun for his generosity. However, seeing no other escape from his pain, he impales himself with Jaehyun's sword. Before fading completely, he whispers that he'll leave the rest to Jaehyun. With that, Jaehyun's system alerts him that he's completed the mission Legacy, and a sword drops from the vanished young man. Jaehyun realizes this was nothing more than a hidden quest, but he absolutely hated how things ended. Elsewhere, Sil received shocking news. Why did Heiho Mask decide to work with the Red Buffaloes? She demanded, her indignation clear for all to see. Hatch watched her, thinking how his boss once only cared about recruiting talented players for her guild. But now, he concluded, Sil was utterly obsessed with Heiho Mask, and he had a terrible feeling about it. Suddenly, Singlet materialized out of nowhere, declaring he needed to speak with Sil. Hatch was stunned. He'd barely sensed the player's presence, wondering how he'd arrived so fast. Sil, unimpressed, asked, "Why should I talk to someone I don't even know?" Singlet slowly closed the distance, then asked, "Do you want me to get rid of Heiho Mask for you?" Sil's only response was a chilling, terrifying smile. After his elimination, Aben, the former Order member, left a sword behind. Our protagonist took the blade to Ma Wung, who was deeply moved to hear what had befallen his old friend. Ma Wung lamented that he couldn't do anything for Aben, but thanked the protagonist for bringing closure to his friend's story. With a heavy heart, Ma Wung told Jaehyun to keep the sword. Jaehyun initially felt a pang of discomfort, thinking it would be hard to wield a sword with such a tragic history. However, when he checked the weapon's stats, his eyes widened. It boasted insane attributes. His opinion instantly flipped. Jaehyun profusely thanked Ma Wung for entrusting him with such a powerful item, realizing he'd hit the absolute jackpot with this quest. Stepping outside, Jaehyun silently thanked Aben for the incredible gift. Thanks to the sword, he wouldn't need to buy a new weapon anytime soon. Even better, the money he'd been saving for new gear was now free to be spent on other things. But his relief was short-lived. Outside the NPC's hut, the protagonist found himself completely surrounded. A horde of players attacked Heiho without warning, leaving him utterly bewildered. "I'm not even wearing my mask!" Jaehyun shouted. "How do you know I'm Haho?" Amidst the chaos, Romani contacted Jaehyun. Her voice was grim. "A bounty of 100 million gold has been placed on your head, Jaehyun." The protagonist was utterly stunned, his mind reeling, completely at a loss for what to do. Later, Sil pressed Singlet, "Why do you want to eliminate Heiho?" Singlet's answer was cold and calculated. Haho is a variable. He compared him to a game of chess, explaining that despite being a mere pawn, Haho moved as if he were a much more powerful piece, doing whatever he pleased. In other words, Heiho broke the game by refusing to follow the rules. Therefore, eliminating him was the only logical course of action. Singlet revealed that many guilds had already agreed to the plan, and with the Thunder Hunters Guild on board, success was guaranteed. All Singlet needed now was Sil's final approval to proceed. proceed. But Sil, instead of agreeing, slammed Singlet down as if he were nothing, pinning him beneath her foot. Sil declared she knew Singlet was allied with the scoundrels who stole the monster her guild was hunting. Therefore, Sil refused to work with opportunistic thieves like him. Realizing his strategy had failed, Singlet switched to a more aggressive approach. With a burst of strength, Singlet pushed Sil away. Now free from Sil's grasp, Singlet tried to make a run for it. Seeing this, Hahui vowed she wouldn't let him escape so easily. However, Sil ordered no one to pursue the fugitive. Instead, she instructed them to contact the other guilds. Sil had just realized there were more players interested in Haho, but Sil declared that no one would take Haho from her, and anyone who dared to touch Haho would be eliminated. Sil commanded her ally to relay this message to all guilds. As he ran, Singlet reported that negotiations had failed, and he was ready to accept any punishment. But now, Singlet asked if he could proceed with the plan to eliminate Haho. His boss refused, stating that Singlet had been exposed and he had other aces up his sleeve. Now, the boss just needed to wait for the results to unfold. After all, the boss claimed time was on his side, and he was eager to see what Haho would do to escape this time. Back to our protagonist, Jaehyun knew that even if he eliminated everyone hunting him, more would simply appear. Romini agreed. Jaehyun had become a winning lottery ticket, and she pressed him on what he'd done to provoke such a frenzy. Jaehyun himself wasn't sure, having crossed paths with many recently, but he suspected Chase Yolyan was behind it. However, Jaehyun knew her personality. Chase Yolyan would have confronted him personally, not sent mere hunters. Without an answer, Romani asked what Jaehyun planned to do. She didn't want to run out of editing material, so Romani insisted he couldn't stop playing now. But Jaehyun would rather die than quit, and he used his system to purchase an item that might be his way out. Beyond that, Jaehyun wanted to know who was truly after him and wouldn't give up until he found out. With that, Jaehyun summoned his golem. The golem immediately entered the fray, eliminating several adversaries. Some were struck with fear, but others concluded that golems were typically slow and posed no real threat. What they didn't know was that our protagonist had invested all his stats into his clay creation skill, then fused it with a wyvern skull. With this, Jaehyun transformed his golem into a terrifying new creature. Jaehyun mused that he'd given up a lot of good food to buy this item, and now his opponents would pay with their lives. With a flourish, Jaehyun unveiled his wyvern-transformed golem and challenged who wants to be the first to face it. Even though Romini was his video editor, lately, she'd been acting more like a manager than an editor. She was swamped with work. Romini couldn't stop working for Jaehyun. She was always captivated by the raw footage he produced. Sometime after dealing with his pursuers, Jaehyun formally invited Sil to a private audience. Jaehyun waited at the meeting spot until Sil finally arrived. Sil pointed out that she'd requested a meeting with him before, but he hadn't even responded, so she asked what made him change his mind. Jaehyun glared at her, seething with rage. He knew all too well that Chase Yolyan was the one who tormented him most in his past life, and she was responsible for turning his own group against him. Jaehyun desperately wanted his revenge right then, but instead he chose to talk, asking if Sil was the one who put a bounty on his head. Sil denied it, asking if he'd called the meeting just for that. However, Jaehyun retorted that no one else would do it but her. He knew Sil hated that he'd refused to join her guild, and had even snatched some of her achievements. He also accused Sil of always eliminating anyone who interfered with her interests. Sil clearly noticed Jaehyun's nervousness and asked for a chance to respond. Hearing this, Jaehyun remembered Chase Yolyan saying the exact same thing in his past life, which only fueled his suspicion. However, Sil explained that some time ago, an unknown player approached her, claiming Haho was causing trouble. The player then suggested that the 30 largest guilds form a pact to eliminate him. Jaehyun recalled something similar happening in his past life, but Sil claimed she refused to be part of such a pact, stating she would never join something like that. Seeing how they interfered with her guild's main quest, Sil believed Haho wasn't the only target. Jaehyun figured an unknown player bold enough to mess with the Thunder Hunters had to be insane, and he only knew one guy capable of that. Sil, in turn, asked if he believed her. Jaehyun replied that he only believed half her story, but that was enough. At least he'd found out Chase Yolyan wasn't the one who placed the bounty, but before Jaehyun could leave, Sil invited him once more to join her guild. Annoyed, Jaehyun told her she should learn to take no for an answer and stop trying to recruit him. Sil, in turn, said she realized Jaehyun didn't like her, claiming she always felt many people hated her for no apparent reason. However, Sil insisted she was saying this for Haho's own good. She believed he wouldn't last long on his own as a 100 million gold target. That's why she wanted to officially protect him, but for that she needed Heiho to trust her, her, and she guaranteed she wouldn't force him into anything. Annoyed, Jaehyun declared he'd rather die than join the Thunder Hunters. Sil told him not to be so proud, but Jaehyun insisted he wouldn't join any guild. His ambition was to become Warlord's strongest player on his own, and he vowed never to accept a guild's offer. At first, Sil found his answer quite childish. However, Sil simply told Jaehyun to do his best. She wished him luck on his journey and promised to be one of his strongest competitors. Jaehyun, however, took this as a declaration of war, especially since his rival said it with a smile. With that, Jaehyun flew off on his golem, leaving Chai Seolyan behind. Pausing to think, Jaehyun remembered Chai Seolyan was heavily pursued in his previous life, and figured something must have happened before his regression. But he decided it was better to ponder that later, after he figured out who was behind the bounty on his head. Soon after, Romani called Jaehyun, demanding to know what he'd done this time. Romani claimed a new wanted poster had been plastered everywhere, promising an even bigger reward for Jaehyun's head. Romani then asked if Jaehyun had found a sponsor or something. Jaehyun replied it wasn't a sponsor, but a crazy woman who wouldn't leave him alone. Sometime later in Missandra Castle, a young boy was getting beaten by bullies. They were demanding he hand over a quest item, claiming he couldn't complete the quest anyway, so it was better to let someone else handle it. The boy declared he wouldn't be robbed again, and for that he took a kick. The bully sneered, saying the boy just needed the right incentive to think things over. But amidst the chaos, someone stopped him. The bully didn't understand what was happening until Jaehyun asked the boy if he was Git, the quest guy. The boy replied his name was Git, but he knew nothing about being the quest guy. With that, Jaehyun realized it was still too early. This event hadn't happened in his current life yet. Even so, Jaehyun told the boy to follow him. Enraged, the bully demanded to know who Jaehyun thought he was, interfering in their business uninvited. When attacked, Jaehyun defended himself, swiftly putting the bully and his gang to sleep. Git realized this unknown man had taken down 3 guys in one go. Jaehyun, sensing he'd piqued the boy's curiosity, simply said he was a good person passing by who decided to help. After being saved from the group of bullies, the boy thanked the protagonist for his help. He revealed he had already given up, and if not for the intervention, he would have been robbed by his attackers. Jaehyun, the protagonist, explains the mission the bullies almost stole was a ruin exploration quest. He states that completing it would nullify the blocking field behind them. Surprised, Git asks how Jaehyun knows this. Instead of answering, the protagonist simply demands the quest for himself, making Git think Jaehyun isn't much different from the bullies who attacked him. Sometime later, Jaehyun heads to the mission location, visibly annoyed. He was forced to bring Git along, and the kid wouldn't stop complaining. Jaehyun tells Git to shut up and suggests that instead of whining, he should focus on getting stronger so he won't get robbed again. Git, however, argues it's useless. He's tried to defend himself countless times, but never succeeded. The kid confesses he hates being weak, but everything he tries fails, leading to his constant subjugation. Git explains his attempts to join team raids always flopped because he'd just mess everything up. Even when he tried to go solo, monsters would kill him. That's why he gave up being an explorer and started taking smaller quests, helping the village NPCs. That's how he got the current quest, and for the first time, he felt the game was rewarding his efforts. For that reason, he fought so hard not to let the quest slip away, and only didn't confront Jaehyun because he knew he couldn't win, instead convincing him to come along. Jaehyun, however, retorts that if Git doesn't want to change, he can keep living pathetically. He declares that no matter what, he'll clear the dungeon. However, Jaehyun adds that just because Git has lived this way until now, doesn't mean he has to live like this forever. Git, in turn, reflects that he once believed he'd die if he didn't hand the quest over to the protagonist. Now Jaehyun left him behind, making the kid consider quitting the game and abandoning the protagonist. However, Git knows that if he does, the quest will fail for both of them, and Jaehyun might seek revenge. So, Git decides it's best to wait at the dungeon entrance until his quest partner finishes clearing it. But as he tries to wait, Git encounters a massive monster and spirals into despair at the danger. From afar, Jaehyun hears the screams and asks what's happening. Then, Git comes running and hugs him, consumed by fear. The protagonist tries to push the kid away, and in doing so, leaves him at the monster's mercy. Jaehyun can't let Git die, so he ends up helping, but grumbles that he can't stand hearing the screams of such an annoying brat anymore. Sometime later, they escape the monsters. Jaehyun accuses Git of doing that on purpose, but the kid denies it and apologizes for attracting them. Furious, the protagonist orders Git to stay put and not follow him, as he'll go after the boss and then return. Still scared, Git asks if Jaehyun is really going to face the dungeon boss alone. He explains that it's the giant spider's lair, an enemy famous for being insanely difficult. Plus, on the way, there are small spiders that explode on contact and constantly respawn. To make matters worse, the giant spider has a shell as hard as steel, making any physical attack difficult. Hearing the description, Jaehyun sarcastically suggests Git go help if it's so difficult. Git, however, says he can't and just wishes him luck. Jaehyun then states he just needs to avoid the smaller enemy's attention, believing he'll defeat the boss without issue. He charges towards the giant spider, and Git notices the protagonist did it without even touching a single web. The giant spider senses an intruder in its lair, but before it can react, Jaehyun strikes. The protagonist seizes the chance to smash one of its legs, declaring this is just the beginning. His plan: cripple its legs, then go for the body. As Jaehyun battles, Git watches, amazed that the protagonist is taking on the spider alone. He believes if Jaehyun keeps this pace, he might actually win. But glancing down, Git realizes he's accidentally stepped on a spider web. That means a hatchling is coming for a meal. Suddenly, a spider hatchling explodes upon touching Git, a signal that draws even more hatchlings to their new target. Git screams in pain as they attack, unable to escape, quickly surrounded by the spiders. Then a massive explosion erupts, with Git at its epicenter. Jaehyun, however, snatches Git away just in time, but not without calling him a total deadweight. Git asks why he came back for him. Jaehyun, in turn, snaps at the kid to shut up and run for the dungeon entrance. He claims that after all this, he can't let the mission fail, but if it does, he vows to get revenge on Git. Terrified, Git watches Jaehyun get swarmed by spiders in his place, powerless to help. As he flees, Git wonders why he's so pathetic. He blames himself for always causing trouble for others, knowing he always ends up running away. Then, mid-escape, Git trips over a rock and falls, making his situation even worse. Overwhelmed by self-blame, Git cries, furious at himself. He wants to do something, but he knows he can't help. After all, Git has accepted he's utterly useless. Places like this aren't meant for losers. Amidst his anxiety attack, Git remembers the protagonist's words, that even though Git had been useless all this time, it didn't have to be forever. At that, the boy stops crying and starts to reflect. Back in the spider's lair, the protagonist is trapped in a web cocoon, but after some time, Jaehyun breaks free. Jaehyun had deliberately let the spiders capture him so that he and the kid wouldn't be completely obliterated. Now free, Jaehyun plans to resume the mission, but without his skeletons, he'll have to fight alone. Suddenly, Git appears. Jaehyun demands to know why Git returned. Git explains he couldn't let Jaehyun face the boss alone and came back to help. Jaehyun scoffs, claiming he doesn't need the kid's help, calling his return a mistake. But Git insists he always runs from danger, and he wants to put an end to that by helping Jaehyun defeat the boss. However, Jaehyun reminds Git he's already saved his life multiple times in this single mission and isn't keen on doing it again. He tells Git to save himself while he still can. After all, Jaehyun doesn't want a crybaby messing up his fight against the dungeon boss. Yet the kid pleads to join the fight, insisting he can help. Despite his brave words, fear grips Git, making his entire body tremble. Still, he stands his ground. Git realizes this is the first time he won't run from a fight. With his torch, he tries to set the smaller spiders ablaze. A while later, the kid stops to rest. Then Git's system reveals he successfully cleared the dungeon. Git, however, feels a pang of shame receiving the credit. After all, Jaehyun did all the heavy lifting. Still, Git knows he at least helped a little, but this fleeting joy is about to shatter. Back to the protagonist. Just as Jaehyun defeats the boss, the thugs he'd previously taken down reappear. With Git held hostage, they thank Jaehyun for doing all their dirty work. Jaehyun, in turn, asks if they're trying to bargain or something. The thug leader demands the dungeon's reward in exchange for Git's life. Jaehyun asks what would happen if he refused. The bandit snarls that he'll eliminate Git right there, then come for Jaehyun. Git shouts for Jaehyun not to accept the deal, arguing that Jaehyun worked hard to clear the dungeon and deserves the reward, so he shouldn't give it up. Enraged, the bandit punches Git, sneering that he's as pathetic as ever. He adds that Git is too pathetic to even understand his surroundings, so he shouldn't interfere. However, Git spits in the bandit's face, declaring that compared to the spiders he faced earlier, the bandit before him is nothing. Furious, the bandit lunges, trying to stab Git with his knife. Just then, the protagonist makes his move. Jaehyun states he's willing to give up the reward, but to get it, the bandits will have to fight Jaehyun and win. The gang leader scoffs, claiming the protagonist must be insane, insisting Jaehyun couldn't take down their group alone. However, they quickly realize Jaehyun isn't alone. While no one was looking, the protagonist had summoned his skeletons, taking advantage of their distraction, focused on the front to summon his allies from behind. Suddenly, one of the bandits recognizes the protagonist isn't just any player. He's Ha-Ho Mask. Ha-Ho Mask is the only known player to use skeletons as allies, and the only one capable of soloing and conquering a dungeon like this. But the gang leader questions what a player like Jaehyun is doing in such a low-level dungeon. Jaehyun retorts that it's none of their business, and now that he has the upper hand, he declares he'll take everything the bandits possess. Naturally, his polite request leaves his opponents no room to resist. A short while later, the protagonist collects the defeated player's watches. Jaehyun sighs, disappointed they hold nothing of value. Git, meanwhile, reflects that he'd always thought he was beside a talented player, but now he realizes the protagonist is far more than that. Git then thanks Ha-Ho Mask for saving him countless times and for helping him clear the dungeon, admitting that without Jaehyun's help, he never would have accomplished such a feat alone. Alright, now that I've said my piece, I won't bother you anymore. But before Git leaves, Jaehyun tells him he can keep the reward. Git says he doesn't need it, claiming he doesn't want something he doesn't deserve. However, Jaehyun asks if Git will continue playing Warlord. Git starts to cry, confirming he'll keep playing and give his absolute best from now on. A while later, Jaehyun returns to his normal attire. He feels much more comfortable. Jaehyun thought it best to walk around disguised for a while to avoid being recognized by bounty hunters. But since he'd been discovered, his disguise was blown. Still, he believes he got a lot out of the last mission. Jaehyun contacted Git, the player designated by the system to collect rare quests, believing he'll be quite useful in the future. However, Jaehyun has his doubts if the crybaby will truly become the quest master he knew in his past life. Either way, the blockade field has dissipated, and it's more than time to enter. Jaehyun's goal is to reach the Cursed Territory, the location of Warlord's second main quest chapter. In the main square of Ricky City, within the Cursed Territory, a player arrives thinking it's the game's new map. He knows the blockade field was just taken down, but he notices the place is already swarming with players. His companion, Nuppy, tells him not to get his hopes up, as everyone there is an adversary. Nuppy points out that the Ares Guild, one of the top 30, is already there, along with the Triple Wing Guild, another top 30. Plus, the Hydra Guild is also present, and they're the most likely to be the first to complete the main quest. The young man comments that everyone already knows the main quest location, and wonders if a small guild like his stands a chance against so many strong opponents. Amidst this, someone appears, declaring they're in his way and demanding they move. Immediately, they recognize Ha-Ho Mask. Jaehyun's fame had only skyrocketed after everyone discovered he was responsible for taking down the blockade protecting this area. To Jaehyun's surprise, the area was already packed. He hadn't expected the news to spread so fast, meaning the number of competitors had surged. Amidst this, someone mutters that Ha-Ho must be getting help from a game developer, believing it's impossible for anyone to be that good without external aid. Jaehyun lets them think what they want, knowing he only got this far thanks to his own skills, and the others are just jealous. Then, amidst his thoughts, another player calls him Chae Seolyan's pet. They'd heard the Thunder Queen threaten to eliminate anyone who touched Ha-Ho, plus he'd also been seen flirting with the Red Buffaloes. So, the leaders of both guilds must be fighting over him. With that, the gossips wondered what Ha-Ho had done to attract the attention of the guild leaders who killed the corrupted count. Furious, Jaehyun attacks one of the gossips, declaring he's no one's pet, much less a lover. He demands to know who's spreading so many rumors about him. Amidst the chaos, a pirate intervenes in the fight. Sarabo, an NPC from the Secret Order, tells Jaehyun not to get involved in such an important quest. Seeing the NPC, everyone is certain this is the right place for the next quest. Jaehyun realizes this too and calms down. Now that Jaehyun is calmer, Sarabo says he has a few things to clarify. Sarabo explains that this territory is cursed, as it was where the corrupted count conducted experiments for a long time. Because of this, the monsters living near this area are cursed, and they need to clear the area first. Jaehyun remembers hearing the same thing in his past life. Not only that, but Jaehyun knows that to study the curse, the NPC will ask them to capture a cursed monster called the Goat-Headed Chimera. Though this monster is mischievous, it's not impossible to defeat, and Jaehyun knows exactly where to find the creature. However, the pirate declares they must find the evil eye. Suddenly, Jaehyun's plans crumble, whispers spread. The evil eye is a level 150 cursed monster, making the fight even more brutal. Still, Surobo demands that to proceed, everyone must bring him the monster, but he states only 4 teams will be sent on the mission. So, they either team up or drop out. Anyone not part of those 4 won't move forward. This sparks chaos among the players. However, the pirate reiterates they don't have to team up if they don't want to, wishing good luck to those who undertake the mission. Immediately, a frenzy erupts as players scramble towards the objective, but Jaehyun remains rooted to his spot. Mid-rush, a player bumps into Jaehyun and instantly recognizes him as Haho Mask, but he wonders why Haho Mask looks so grim. Lost in thought, Jaehyun questions why things aren't unfolding as they did in his past life. He's realizing the future is constantly shifting, and he needs to understand why. For Jaehyun, only 2 possibilities exist. First, the future changed because of his regression. Second, some of his information about the past is flawed. Now he just needs to figure out which option is the truth. Meanwhile, Singlet traverses the cursed territory, informing his boss he plans to start the main quest immediately. But as soon as it's done, he wants to hunt down Haho Mask. A short while later, a chimera monster ambushes a group of players. The player is deep in battle, dodging attacks, and asks if the magic team is ready. Nuppy replies he needs more time to charge the magic attack. As they wait, the monster charges the player, who acts as a decoy. Then, the magic attack unleashes, striking the monster, which is incinerated by the fireball. The player, who served as bait, rests, as the system confirms the group's victory. Everyone is exhausted, but Nuppy instructs them to return to their positions and prepare for the next wave. However, one of his allies begs to go home, terrified of facing more goat-headed chimeras. The ally claims the main quest is harder than they imagined, and they won't be able to surpass the stronger guilds. Nuppy, in turn, snaps at his comrade to stop complaining, because something is happening near their location.